That's my childhood house. I wasn't turning down the street that I grew up in. I wasn't standing near the large oak in the front yard of the house where I had lost all my baby teeth. I wasn't sitting inside the kitchen, where on my 15th birthday, I accidentally dropped the cake that my mom had baked, which made my family laugh so hard that we shed tears. No. I was holding an oil painting at a Goodwill on the other side of the country. That can't be possible, my husband said. It can be possible, Parker, because I'm holding the flipping painting and telling you that this was my house. Exactly. 1, language, he joked. 2, can I say something without you jumping down my throat? Parker asked, his voice even. Fine, I said. Is there an outside chance that this just looks like your childhood home? I mean, you grew up in the suburbs. A lot of those houses were pretty cookie cutter, no? I hated to admit that he had a point. But as I stared at the house, I couldn't come around to that line of thinking. This was my house. The oak tree looked the same. Hell, the roses in the flower beds were the same size and color as I remembered them. I shook my head. No, I mean, I hear you and you're not off base. But dude, this is my house. I pointed at the porch. I broke that railing trying to do a ballet spin and I fell into the bushes. You? Miss 2 left feet. Senorita trips a lot. You tried to do a ballet spin. To be fair, I did the spin. I just didn't stick the landing. A minor detail in the world of dance. The landing part. I landed on the bushes right here, I said, pointing to the painting. Hold on, I have to send a photo to my mom. Does she have any old house photos? Of course she does. You've met her, right? I had Parker hold the painting and snapped a few pictures. I sent them over to Mom and asked if she had a photo to compare it to. The message came back a minute later. Oh my god, that is our house. Weird. Here's a photo I have saved on my phone. Another ding brought us the photo that she mentioned. It looked exactly like the artwork in my hand. I showed Parker and he nodded. Jesus Christ, he said. And that is it. I told you. That's wild. Is it a print or a real painting? I ran my hand across the art. There was a palpable texture to the brushstrokes. Sometimes a print may have varnish applied to give the impression of brushstrokes, but this wasn't that. I think this is real, but let me check something else, I said, walking toward the wall of ugly lamps. I plugged in a lamp and held the painting in front of the bulb. Some artists will draw the picture first with a pencil before painting. Sometimes you can see those strokes when you hold it up to the light. Staring at the oak tree in the painting, I saw the telltale graphite marks. It's real, I declared. And my minor in art history is still paying dividends. Who painted it? A slash of red paint in the corner mimicked his signature, but Parker and I stared at it as if it were written in Minoan Linear A. And Parker traced the paint with his finger, forwards and backwards. The first name may be George or Jeff. I think George. Look at how it flows. He retraced the letters and it made sense to me. Okay, what's the last name? Hell if I know. I tried Parker's finger tracing. It didn't work for me. It felt like I was tracing a line drawn by someone with too much caffeine in their system. These didn't seem like actual letters. It might be Moffat, a soft voice said from behind us. We turned and saw that a Goodwill employee had appeared. She was a short, frail-looking, elderly woman with a hairstyle that resembled a well-constructed cumulus cloud in both color and shape. Moffat, I said. I think that's an M, she said, pointing to 2 humps. And then it kind of circles into an O, and the double Fs. The I and the T are somewhat stylized, I think. Oh, artists being artists. I looked at it and yeah, it kind of looked like Moffat. I can see it now. George Moffat, you think? Oh, I do. Beautiful piece though, don't you think? Yes, I said. It looks exactly like the house that I grew up in. I showed her the photo that my mom sent. Oh, how strange. Right? I grew up across the country. Why is this even here? You know, when I was younger, there was a company that would paint your home for you. House painters? Parker deadpanned. Ignore him, I said. He doesn't know how to act in public. She laughed. Oh, I understand. I have one just like him at home. That's why he's at home. I laughed. You are teaching and I'm taking notes, ma'am. Anyway, they would come paint portraits of your house. It was a thing for a few years. And this looks like one of those. There may be a company name on the back under the frame. I flipped the painting over and gingerly removed the frame. Sure enough, there was a small, faded sticker that read, Cozy Home Portraits Company. There wasn't any other information. I made an impressed noise. Would you look at that? Now I have a jumping off point to find out what this is all about. Thank you so much. Marge, thank you. Sorry again for this guy. Oh, Marge, please forgive me. You're a gentle woman and a scholar. Marge leaned into him and nodded at me. Oh, you're punching above your weight with her, kiddo. Keep her happy. Parker laughed, wrapped his arm around my hip, and pulled me in for a hug. Marge, that's the best advice I've ever received from a Goodwill employee. If only your barber had given you good advice, you could have avoided that haircut. I burst out laughing and Parker did too. Oh, Marge, I hope to grow up just like you. Aim higher, dear. But you find a guy who can take a joke. That's a win. You guys want to get that or you're still debating? I looked at Parker and he nodded. How can we not get this? Even if it's just for the story. Marge smiled. See, you can learn. Come on, kids, I'll ring you up. When I got home, I immediately began researching the Cozy Home Portraits Company. I had a hard time finding anything. Most of the search results were links to people on Reddit asking the same questions. Apparently, there were a lot of folks like me who were surprised to find their childhood homes immortalized on canvas. One commenter said something that stuck with me. Hey Parker, listen to this, I said reading the post. My mom says she remembers someone approaching her and asking if they could take a photo so that they could paint the house later. She had told them no at first, but they said that they would do it for no cost. Mom agreed and assumed she would get the painting at some point, but she never heard from the company again. What's the next commenter say? Oh, this sounds fake, I read. Kind of a dickish response, no? It's Reddit, he said, shrugging. Maybe they just used the house for inspiration and sold the paintings to commercial houses for reproductions. Well, then why bother involving the homeowners at all? Maybe to assuage their worries of somebody standing outside their home and snapping photos of their house, Parker suggested. I mean, anybody could take a photo of our house and I would have no idea unless I saw them do it. True. It's weird, I'll grant you that. But I think I'm on the right track. Commercial art, Americana stuff. And that was to be it. He may have been onto something, but that answer didn't feel right. I couldn't work out the logic. If this company had been around for a while and painted portraits of homes all across the country for commercial sale, why wasn't there any record of them? No stories online, no official business records, no known CEO or lists of artists or anyone. Hell, even searching for the name George Moffat didn't yield results. My mind told me that there was something off about this. A sense of dread loomed over the whole thing. I let it marinate all day to see if I'd reconsider. Shocking to no one, I didn't. I told Parker as much as we got ready for bed. "You're reacting that way because of what's happening in the world right now," Parker said, yawning. "There are real evil people out there, but they aren't painting pictures." "Hitler painted pictures," I said. He gave me a deadpan stare. "You know what I mean. I just can't let it go, you know. It's odd. Odd that it was done at all. Odd that it traveled all the way out here. Odd that I found it. Odd stacked on odd stacked on odd. Turtles all the way down." "What?" I said, crinkling up my face. "What do turtles have to do with anything?" He laughed. "Oh, nothing, just a dumb expression." He yawned again. "Why is this bothering you so much? Some random company painted and sold pictures of my childhood house with nobody knowing about it. It's odd," he said with a smile. "Yeah, very. It's just not sitting right with me." Parker yawned for a third time. My melatonin is kicking in here. Get some rest and see how you feel in the morning. If you still feel off, maybe call your mom and see if she has a story to tell. She might know something." He didn't wait for my response. Instead, he rolled over, shut off the lamp, and turned on our sound machine. As digital thunderstorms rolled into our bedroom, I lay down on my pillows but didn't fall asleep. This whole thing smothered my thoughts as much as my weighted blanket did my body. I would call Mom tomorrow, see what she knew. If anything. I heard light snores coming from Parker's direction and I sighed. That man could fall asleep even if the house were on fire. I flipped on YouTube, found something to help me sleep, and I closed my eyes. Or I would have, if I hadn't seen our front porch light turn on. A cold touched my brain and froze the rest of my body. The light going off didn't mean a prowler was trying to jimmy open our lock. It could be a bug flying too close to the sensor, or a sleepwalking squirrel. Improbable, sure, but they were better than the alternative. I looked over at Parker. I didn't want to wake him, but I also wasn't keen on investigating alone. While I was going over the pros and cons of getting out of bed, I heard a noise in the kitchen. That made the decision easy. I elbowed Parker and he rejoined the waking world. "What?" he asked, his voice a blend of exhaustion and annoyance. "Our front porch light went off," I whispered. Raccoons or possums tripping the light," he said. "It's not worth waking me." "I know, but I heard somebody in the kitchen." His eyes zinged open. In a flash, he was on his feet and grabbed the bat that we kept near the bed. He quietly inched along the wall until he got to the bedroom doorway. He peeked out and scanned the room before turning back to me and shrugging. I pointed to the kitchen again before popping up and joining him on the wall. Parker wasn't pleased. He told me, not in words but vigorous nods, to go back to bed and wait. I didn't. He gave in and we made our way out of the bedroom, me walking directly behind him like some backwards waltz. I saw nothing. That went double after Parker slammed his hand on the switch, flooding the room with light and damn near blinding me in the process. I let out a painful yelp and I covered my eyes to adjust. I heard Parker sigh. "We're good. Nothing in here." "Oh, you gotta tell me before you do that," I said, finally checking out the room. Everything initially looked washed out. "I'm nearly blind." "I wanted the element of surprise," Parker said. "Well, you achieved it. All I see now are a bunch of little diamonds everywhere." He walked into the kitchen. "Your intruder is nothing more than a fallen salt shaker," he said, holding up the culprit. "Oh." And like I said, the porch light was probably from a raccoon or something. I'm going back to bed. You should too. He walked past me, patted my butt as he did, and headed back to bed. I was about to join him when my eyes had landed on the painting. I walked over to it and stared. In the store, looking at it had flooded my emotions with joy and happiness. But now, there was none of that. Unease seeped into my blood and rushed through my body. Something was different about the painting. I couldn't put my finger on what had changed, but I knew that something had. It was giving me chills. I grabbed a nearby cloth napkin and draped it over the artwork, like a coroner covering a dead body. My thinking was that if there was something supernatural about this thing, the napkin would keep it at bay. It's dumb, I know, but it made sense at the time. I couldn't believe it when you sent me that picture. That is so wild. And Mom was too chipper for this early in the morning. She always was, though. A real rise with the early bird kind of gal. And that wasn't me. I still had bedhead as I sipped my cup of coffee. Parker, another early riser, cooked breakfast. Yeah, I thought so too. Somebody told me a company used to go around and paint pictures of homes. They would ask the homeowners beforehand. Any memory of that? Oh, not that I can remember, but back then it was mostly your father who spoke with the salesmen. I found them unseemly. I can't imagine he would allow somebody to do that. Rest his soul. Yeah, I agree, Dad was pretty private. We had a neighbor who was a painter, though. Carl. No, that wasn't it. Craig. Gosh dang my ancient brain. Bonnie, don't get old, it's hell. I'm trying not to. It's why I do my nightly skincare routine. Yeah, it's intense. Parker added with a smirk. Oh, what was his name? Oh, it's been years since I thought of him. Craig Morris, something like that. He didn't live near us for long. Oh, Dad didn't like him. At all. Why? Oh, Craig was one of those people who were just constantly irritating. The human equivalent of a popcorn kernel stuck in your teeth. He rubbed your father the wrong way. I don't remember Dad talking about him. Oh, he didn't around you, but with me, oh boy. Craig used to walk by the house all the time, always whistling Pop Goes the Weasel for some reason. He would stand too close when he talked to you. He would leer at me when I was outside hanging laundry on the line. He would never get the hint that I wanted to be left alone, even though I was always short with him. Especially after he said that you were growing up nicely. Gross, I said. I was 10. Yeah, like I said, he was a weirdo. But again, most of those artist types are, I suppose. You remember your Uncle Walter? He made those ghastly papier-mâché skulls. They used to be all over his house. It was like walking into some cannibal's hut whenever we would go over there. But he was good at making them. Who would want them is another thing altogether. He gave us one and I made your dad keep it in a bag in the garage. Oh, don't bring that ghoulish shit in my house. As my mom rambled about skull shapes like a Victorian phrenologist, a thought came to me. I looked down at the painting and traced the painter's name. Mom, could his name have been Craig Moffat? Parker looked over at me. I nodded down at the painting and traced what I thought the letters were with my finger. He hit his forehead with the spatula and shook his head. Oh my God, yes, that was it. Craig Moffat. God, what a blast from the past. He really was a weird little freak of a man, my mom said, laughing. He used to wear these tiny little shorts and he did not have the legs for them. Looked like 2 toothpicks stuck in an orange. Mom droned on a little longer, but provided nothing of substance beyond Craig Moffat's horrid legs. But she had given me some new information, the artist's real name. As soon as I hung up, I grabbed my laptop. Craig Moffat, not George, Craig. Yeah, I see it now, Parker said. And we should have never trusted Marge. I didn't like the cut of her jib. Oh babe, her jib was flawless, I said, turning to the painting. Her eyes, and not so much. Hey, to be fair, we all agreed it was George Moffat. There he is, Craig Moffat. I turned the computer around and showed a web page dedicated to his art. Parker leaned down to get a closer look. His legs do look like toothpicks stuck in an orange. Rolling my eyes, I turned the laptop back to me and clicked on the man's About Me page. It was illuminating. Craig had quite the little career. He had worked for a few newspaper outlets, a few magazines, some ad campaigns. His stuff was good. There was a list of known works. There are a few house paintings listed here. It has to be him. Has anybody mentioned how odd this is? Parker said with a sly smile. It's catching on. Maybe you saw your home as a happy family home and wanted to capture it for that company. Is there a contact page? Oh, there is, I yelped. I read the page out loud. If you have any questions about Craig or his work, please feel free to reach out here, I said. Oh, that's great. You can email him and ask directly. Moffat Estate at moffatart.com, I read. Oh shit, he's dead. Oh, that shouldn't matter. Maybe the guy who runs the estate can answer your questions. I nodded. It was worth a shot. I started composing a message and Parker went back to breakfast. I glanced at the artwork on the table next to me. Something about it picked at my brain. Hey, I meant to ask, have you been watching professional wiffle ball games on our YouTube? Oh, yeah, I've started turning on games after your melatonin kicks in. Puts me right out. Uh-huh. Are you a wiffle ball fan? Oh no, don't be silly, I said laughing. I just happened across it one night and fell asleep like 10 minutes into a game. It's better than ocean waves. Which game was it? Rhinos against the Storks. Oh man, those two teams hate each other. The Storks have won the last 3 series behind Dustin Braddock's nasty banana ball. I stopped speaking because I could feel Parker's smug smirk on his face. I looked up and caught it with my own eyes. Not a fan, huh? What the hell is a banana ball? Hey, look, they emailed me back already, I said. What the hell? Maybe there isn't a lot going on at the Moffat estate. Hi, Craig Moffat was my father. He did several pieces of local homes during that era. I would love to discuss this with you. Can we set up a call? Yeah, so there clearly isn't a lot going on at the Moffat estate, Parker said. I'm gonna say yes. I think I have to. If for no other reason than my own sanity. Yeah, go for it. I can be there for the call if you need me. So I set up a call with the estate for later that day. Hopefully there would be some information that I could use to stop the itch in my brain. Parker served me breakfast before he got ready to head out to the gym. You never told me what a banana ball is, he said, placing the plate in front of me. Oh, it's a sidearm slurve, a strikeout pitch, nearly unhittable if Braddock is on his game. Parker gave me a quizzical look. I sighed. Not a fan. After Parker had left for the gym, I went back over to the painting. It was still sitting in the last place that I had left it. It still had the napkin over it. The bad vibes that I felt earlier was still there. In fact, they had grown worse. I didn't even want this thing in my house anymore, covered or not. And despite my misgivings, I pulled the napkin off the painting and I gave it a once-over. I felt my stomach gurgle and my throat went dry. Looking at this now literally caused a physical pain. It didn't make sense. Where's the front door? I suddenly asked myself out loud. The front door of the house was gone, blacked out like an actor with perfect teeth coloring in one to look sufficiently destitute for a role. I scraped where the door had been with my thumb. No fresh paint. It was like it had always been that way, but it hadn't. I checked the photo that I sent to my mom to confirm. What in the... There was a creak on the basement stairs. There very much shouldn't have been a creak on the basement stairs. The basement was home to nothing but dust, Christmas decorations, and my ugly childhood couches that we didn't have the heart to throw away. Since none of those things can walk, this made no sense. I tiptoed to the knife block and pulled out a butcher knife. With my phone in my free hand, I used my nimble thumb to unlock it. I was ready to dial 911, but as I stared at my reflection in the knife blade, I questioned whether I was prepared to stick it into another person. I wouldn't know that until it came to that moment. I very much prayed that that wouldn't happen. Another creak near the top of the stairs now. It was getting closer. I flexed the grip on the knife. I tried to control my breathing but couldn't. Turns out that all that woo-woo TikTok relaxation breathing stuff was all just bullshit. My heart was thumping like an angry jazz drummer's long-awaited solo. I felt sweat drip down my neck. Something flickered on the painting. It momentarily took my eyes off the basement door. Like last night, I initially registered nothing different, but then I noticed, through the window of the living room, it looked like someone had turned on a light or lit a fire. Splotches of yellow and orange paint filled the window frame. The jingling of the basement door handle snapped me out of my trance. My palms were sweaty. My legs swayed like bamboo in a strong breeze. I gathered all my remaining strength and I yelled out, "Hey, stay away from me!" I wanted to say more, but overwhelming fear shut me up. The jiggling stopped. Relief. My hectoring had worked for about 2 seconds. The basement door cracked open, and there was a ghostly, pale face staring back at me. That was when my brain firmly decided whether I was a flight or fight kind of girl. I was a flight. Yeah, screw this. I dropped the knife, which clattered on the tile like that drummer hitting the hi-hat, and I sprinted toward my front door. I yelled gibberish the entire time, tears streaming down my face, and I blasted out of the door. My fingers hit send on the call, and seconds later, an annoyingly even-keeled 911 operator connected me with the police. Parker returned home before the police arrived. He found me sitting inside my locked car. Before he could crack a joke, he caught sight of my face. I had been crying and I could feel how puffy my eyes were. Consternation crossed his face. I rolled the window down. "Get in the car." He did, and I explained everything to him. He was astonished. He was confused. He grabbed my hand and held it steady as I went over everything, pausing occasionally to sob like a child with a skinned knee. When I was done, he asked why I didn't leave right away. "Who do you think you are, Rambo?" I laughed. I needed that. For a few seconds I was, and then I wasn't. I wasn't even Gizmo pretending to be Rambo. He gave my arm a loving squeeze. "Hey, if it'll help you calm down, we can watch some pro wiffle ball tonight. I hear the Rhinos are playing the Turkeys." "The Storks," I said. "But they are actually playing the Habaneros tonight. And Gil Faust is looking to debut his chili ball pitch." He leaned in and kissed my forehead. "But you're not a fan." "I'm not." A knock on the window caused me to scream. The cops had arrived. If they were curious why we were sitting in our car, they kept it to themselves. I relayed what happened and they said that they would go into the basement and check it out. 15 minutes later, they came walking out. "Yeah, we didn't see anyone down there," the cop said. But to be fair to you, your basement gave me the heebie-jeebies." "Great," I said. "I know it's not what you wanted to hear, but it's the truth. On the plus side, I haven't seen that love seat since I was a kid. You want it? It's better left to the past. You two have a nice day." We watched them leave. Parker turned to me. "You okay?" "No, and I won't be until I can go into the basement myself." "What? Why?" "I can't explain it, but something's drawing me there. It sounds crazy, I know, but I feel it in my bones." Parker saw the determined look in my eyes. This was going to happen. It had to happen. He sighed. "You want me to go first?" Yes, I said. Are you actually going to wait for me to go in or follow right behind me? Oh, we both know the answer to that. Resuming our reverse waltz, we went back into the house. Once in the kitchen, we stopped near the painting. Parker looked over and agreed that there were changes. We turned our attention to the closed basement door. Parker put his hand on the handle. Hey, we don't have to go down here, Bonnie, he said. The cops didn't find anyone. Alive. If there's a ghost in this house, I need to know. If we know, we can remove it. How? Oh, I'm still working on that part, I said, but I need to know for certain. I won't feel safe otherwise. I'm inclined to just say yes and move on. Something altered the painting already. I mean, who the hell did that? One issue at a time, I said. He knew that he couldn't talk his way out of this. He knew that I needed this, and he loved me enough to see it through to the end. Even though he was petrified too. The skin on his arm had goosebumps as soon as we had walked into the kitchen. It felt like Braille to me now, and the only thing that it said was, oh, let's not do this. But that feeling in my brain, the one drawing me down there, wouldn't leave. It was stronger now that we were in the home. Something was loose in my house. I knew it in my heart. Whatever it was, I needed to keep it from roosting in my new home. I let the ghosts live in the past, leave my future alone. And Parker gripped the handle, sighed so loudly that it was heard 2 towns over, and he opened the door. The stairs led down into the dark of the basement. The floor around the landing was the only thing visible. In the abstract, it wasn't anything. Right now, though, horrifying. Parker found the light switch, illuminating the rest of the space. So far, so good. We took our time walking down the stairs, creaking along the wooden one step at a time. Maybe it would have the same effect on the ghost that hearing the creaking steps did on me. Perhaps the phantom was hiding, holding a ghost knife and deciding if it was going to play Ghost Rambo or just fearfully disappear into the walls. The house in the painting had a basement too, I whispered. When I was a kid, I hated going down there, any time of the day. It just didn't feel natural, you know. Are you trying to get me to stop doing this? Sorry, I'm rambling, I said. I kept right on rambling though. What bothered me wasn't so much about going down there. What scared me was the trip back up, turning your back on the dark. I used to walk backwards up the stairs. Yeah, we can try that in a few minutes, Parker whispered back. Any other ghost stories you want to share before we hit the landing? Sorry, I said. It just popped into my mind. I haven't thought about that fear in years. Since we moved away from there, actually. That's not comforting. We got to the bottom and I took a look around. Everything looked normal. No surprises. Just our old, ugly furniture and friendly Santa decorations smiling and giving us a frozen wave. I thought about turning and heading back up, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was supposed to be down here. I was almost positive that Parker would be furious if I went darting up the stairs without him. Leaving him alone in Spook Central might be grounds for divorce. When we headed over to the furniture, there was a layer of dust on everything. I smacked the pillow, sending it flying into the air. I coughed and sneezed, instantly regretting my actions. Parker's withering glare told me that he wasn't fond of my actions either. Sorry. I don't see anything out of the ordinary here, do you? No, it looks like it always does. Is the feeling gone? Can we go back upstairs now? Before I could answer, we heard the familiar chime from our security system, followed by the calm, reassuring voice informing us that our front door was open. What the hell? I said. "Shh," Parker responded, his finger to his lips. He pointed up to the ceiling, and we cocked our ears and concentrated. For about 20 seconds, there was nothing. Silence. It didn't last. The floorboards wheezed as someone took slow, deliberate steps above us. I could hear the footfalls as they moved from the front door to the hallway. Trembling, Parker pointed up at the ceiling. You could physically see the floor bow over ever so slightly from the person's weight. I didn't even think that was possible. "What do we do?" I whispered. "I don't know. Maybe they'll leave." A second later, we were cloaked in total darkness. All the power in the house had gone out. The only light came from the sunlight streaming in from the open door at the top of the stairs. It wasn't much, but it was a beacon. Our lighthouse. Our way home. "That is all I was able to say. Someone upstairs ran down the hall through the kitchen into the basement door. They slammed it shut, plunging us into instant midnight. I wanted to scream, to yell so loud that it would shake the heavens, but I couldn't. My body physically couldn't make that happen. It would give away our location. I clutched Parker's shirt so hard that I was afraid that I would rip it right off him. If it bothered him, he didn't say. "Oh, this sucks," Parker mumbled. Understatement of the century.
Ho, 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 ho! Merry Christmas!
One of our Santa decorations started going off. I nearly peed myself at Santa's sudden arrival. I imagined it would have been the same response I would have had if I had seen him as a kid. Kris Kringle was soon joined by all of our Christmas decorations going off at once. Dozens of laughing Santas, lights flickering off and on, inflatables rising like zombified plastic bags. The noise was deafening but strangely festive. The strobing lights in the pitch black caused after images to dance in my rods and cones. I slammed them shut and silently prayed for all of this to end. Someone must have heard because as quickly as they had come to life, they stopped. We stood in the darkness, not breathing, not moving. Neither of us knew what to do. Nothing in my life had prepared me for this. I couldn't shake the idea that whatever was coming would be worse than what we had already experienced. There was a creaking again and a sudden rushing of blinding sunlight from the top of the stairs. Somebody had opened the door. Before we could get a glimpse, the door slammed shut and something sprinted down the now dark stairs. I pulled Parker back onto the old love seat. We sat on the edge and kept our heads on a swivel. Even though the basement was too dark to see our own hands, we weren't alone anymore. As my fingertips grazed the couch, I realized something. These were originally my parents. My parents had got them when I was living in the house from the painting. They were a physical connection between the past and now. Are these what caused my sudden desire to come to the basement? Was I being manipulated by this thing? Could I trust myself at all? That dread feeling that I had had since I brought the painting into our house intensified. I felt it in my bones, deeper even. My aura, my soul. I leaned into Parker's ear and whispered an apology. He didn't vocalize a response, but he squeezed my arm and I squeezed it back. My body shook and I couldn't get myself to stop. I wanted to run for the stairs, but that old fear came rushing back. I knew that if I ran up those stairs, it would follow behind me. As something whooshed by us, my hair flowed with it, trailing behind whatever it sprinted past. I nervously dug my fingers into the fabric. We heard the sound of some liquid splattering on the floor across from us. It was water, no, heavier than water. A sound that made my guts twist soon joined the drips and splashes. Someone started whistling a familiar tune. Pop goes the weasel. The Christmas decorations flickered on and off. In the brief flash of light, we could make out a figure standing across from us. Craig Moffat.
Pop
He screamed as the light strobed.
goes
He screamed again, a foot closer this time.
the
Another foot closer, almost directly in front of us now. The lights flickered again, and his face was right next to mine. A sinister smile as he slowly whispered.
weasel.
I felt something wet and slimy rub against my cheek. Parker stood and surprisingly swung at Ghost Craig. It didn't find the ghoul, and as the darkness returned, his fist only found the arm of the couch. I heard his knuckles crack and him swear in pain. My ears were the only thing working at that moment, though. I sat frozen, tears streaming down my face. The lights in the house came back on and I screamed. On the wall across from us, where we had heard the water, the painting was hanging. Only it wasn't the old house. It was the current house. All the windows and doors were filled with flames, and there were two figures on the front lawn. Parker and I. We were both dead. Standing behind our oak tree watching it all was Craig Moffat. "Parker, let's go!" I didn't have to tell him twice. We broke for the stairs and took them 3 at a time until we made it to the top. I grabbed the handle and shoved my shoulder into the door, expecting it to hold firm. It didn't. Parker and I spilled onto our kitchen floor. I scrambled up and practically yanked Parker into the kitchen. I was about to slam the door when I saw Craig Moffat standing at the bottom of the stairs. We locked eyes and my mind flew back to my childhood, a memory stored deep in the folds of my brain. I was sitting on our porch reading a book and I heard that whistling. Craig Moffat, a Polaroid camera in his hands and portrait photos on his mind. I was afraid that he would stop and take a picture of me. I was right. Even now, I could hear the heavy clunk of the shutter and the whirring of the processing photo as it slid out. He shook it, and as the fog of war slowly dissipated on the photos, he smiled.
This way, I won't forget you.
I slammed the door shut and urged Parker to grab the car keys. He turned the corner to do so when I heard him sharply yelp in surprise, followed by the squeak of his sneakers on the hardwood and his butt hitting the ground. I ran into him expecting to see Craig, but I was stunned by the sight of a living man surrounded by 2 yellow hulks outside my front door. Once my brain had processed the information, it was clear that those men were wearing biohazard suits. It still didn't answer why men in biohazard suits were outside my door, but it cleared up that there were. The suitless man in the middle, though, had a more striking resemblance to the ghost that I had just seen in my basement, only younger, fuller, and fleshy. "Sorry to startle you both," the man said, raising his hands in peace. "You had contacted us about a painting you found. I'm David Moffat. Craig was my father." "You've got to be shitting me. You were supposed to talk on the phone," I said. "Yes, but we were worried that things might have progressed too much by then. Tell me, has the door in the painting disappeared yet?" "How did—" David turned to his men. "Call for the extraction team." Turning back to us, he urgently asked, "Where's the painting?" "The basement," I said, "but it looks different now." "What in the hell is going on?" Parker asked. "Different? Would you say violently different? Like our dead bodies on the lawn and the place ablaze, violently different." He nervously turned to where the biohazard-suited men had gone. "The experienced extraction team." Parker stood and held my hand. We looked at each other and back at David Moffat. We both cracked. Small smiles that turned into chuckles that turned into a laughing fit. I read somewhere that mental breaks can start like this. Whatever, I leaned in. David Moffat, the son of your childhood painter neighbor Craig Moffat, himself a ghost that nearly killed us, is standing in our veranda, Parker said, barely able to get the words out between screeching laughter. I mean, what the hell is this life? Seconds later, a team of armed men in hazmat suits carrying unknown machinery rushed in and headed for the basement. We heard one of them scream and then the sounds of mechanical engines warming up. David nodded toward the front door. We should go outside. We did. I mean, what the hell else were we going to do? Once we were outside, David pulled out a pack of cigarettes and offered us one. We both declined. David indulged and nodded back at the house. This is the experience team. What's going on? I asked. I'm gonna level with you. What I'm about to say is pretty weird. I like to say weird to people, it sets the right tone. Sir, on what is easily the weirdest day in not only my and my wife's life, but I would argue humanity's life, nothing that you can say will top what we've already been through, Parker said. I mean, I just discovered that my wife watches professional wiffle ball for God's sake. Not a fan, I mumbled. Dad was a strange man. Lots of demons. When he could keep them at bay, he did great work. But that was never for long. Around the time when you were a kid, he got deep into the occult. It was a faddish passing fancy at first, but soon he found a deeper meaning in it. It consumed him. Around this time, well, he conjured a demon. I think I'm having a stroke. He made a deal. We don't exactly know the details, but what we do know is that Dad agreed to start a company that would paint portraits of people's homes. The twist was that the homes he picked would become targets for the demon. Naturally, Parker said, because why not? He would take a photo of the home and give it to the demon. The demon would curse it and insert it into the canvases of my dad's paintings. These photos would be a connection between the subjects in the art and the demon itself. The pull got stronger when the artwork found its way back to the subjects. And then they would, well, he trailed off. Meet each other, I said. In a matter of speaking, yes. So many questions bounced around my brain. This all sounded so outlandish, and yet the memory of the photo came back to me. This way, I won't forget you, I said out loud. Confused, Parker looked at me. What? We don't know how many paintings Dad did during this time, but we've recovered 65 in locations from New York to California. The people selected seemed to be random, except for you. Why me? Well, my guess, you were neighbors and well, my dad really didn't like your dad. Oh, the feeling was mutual. Just then, the extraction team came rushing out. One was limping. The machines they had brought looked broken, but the lights were still on. One of them had the painting in a biocontainment bag. It was smoking. The experience team, David said, ashing out his smoke on the bottom of his shoe and pocketing the butt. Thank you for letting us help rid you of this menace. The work is exhausting, but my family has to atone for Craig's wicked actions. And David nodded and turned to leave. I reached out and grabbed his shoulder. Wait, that's it? We're free just like that. And just like that, he said, turning to leave. He stopped and spun on his heels. Unless you have something from the old house in your new house, then you kinda sorta leave a back door for the demon to return. So if you do, I suggest destroying it. He tipped his cap and laughed. Parker and I locked eyes. The love seat. We said at the same time. My back hurt just thinking about hauling it up those narrow stairs. Later that night, we torched the sofa in a makeshift fire pit in our backyard. We ate pizza and watched the flames consume the potentially demonic couch. I can't imagine that's a sentence that's been said a lot in history. As we did, relief filled my heart. The dread was gone. I looked over at Parker and smiled. I think we can put to bed the argument about who had the weirder childhood park. He laughed. Yeah, summers with my Amish family can't compete with demons. His phone buzzed and he looked down at the notification with concern. I felt my stomach twist. Oh, please tell me that it's good news. Yeah, it is. The Rhinos Habaneros game is about to start. What? I set a reminder for you. Do you want to watch? I touched my heart and felt pure happiness surge through me. Tears. Grabbing his free hand, I held it tight and I gave it a big squeeze. I have something to confess. I think I'm a legitimate fan of professional wiffle ball. I know, babe. I know. We sat together, letting the crackling of a burning demon couch and the crack of a wiffle ball bat fill the night air. I snuggled into Parker's shoulder. It was warm, inviting. Home and not one haunted by an angry ghost. How did one girl get so lucky? I only noticed the notification because I had taken my phone off vibrate. I'm someone who detests the constant dinging and chiming of a modern smartphone. The only reason that I even bought one is because my job required me to upgrade my flip phone, and so to try and keep as much of the digital noise out of my daily life. I always have it set to vibrate at most, and usually silent. But I was expecting a call from my doctor's office to schedule my yearly physical. So to make sure that I wouldn't miss it, I had set my notification volume to full blast while I cleaned up around the apartment. When the annoying ding-ding smashed through the relaxed atmosphere provided by the playful vocals of Brigitte Bardot coming from the record player, despite being only halfway done, I walked over and picked up the phone from the counter. If nothing else, it would be a brief distraction from the monotony. When I saw that it was a Facebook notification from one of my old friends that I hadn't spoken to in a while, I smiled slightly. Well, what do you know? I tapped it, opening the app and fully expecting to see a comment on my wall about how we needed to catch up soon. But instead, I came across the last thing that I expected to see. Rest in peace, man. Gone way too soon. I only had a moment to feel the pure, unfiltered confusion at the two sentences before my phone began ringing and making me jump slightly. After a second's hesitation, I answered it, and I was greeted by the cheerful and friendly voice of my doctor's assistant. Normalcy returned, and shifting into professional mode, I quickly set a date and time for the week after next to see him before hanging up. Pulling the phone away from my ear, I stared at the screen in the strange pose. And then the realization hit me and I began to laugh. Brett, you utter idiot. My friend was always one to play off-color and dumb jokes on me. Pulling a stunt like this would be right up his alley. It would confuse the hell out of everyone else, but he would know that I would eventually get it and laugh about it together. Chuckling, I opened Messenger and quickly typed out a direct reply. A very funny, weirdo. That's a new one, I'll give you that. Congratulations on confusing the heck out of me with that post. You're gonna either completely baffle everyone else or make me have to reassure everybody on my friends list by the end of the day. I'm getting you back for this. Satisfied and imagining him laughing his butt off when he saw my message, I returned my phone to silent and went about finishing up my cleaning. Then, wanting some fresh air and needing to pick up a few things from the store and pharmacy, I locked my door, got into my aging Crown Vic, and I took off. The unusually warm spring weather was nice enough that I was able to roll down my windows, and I waved at one of my neighbors mowing his lawn, receiving a smile and a wave in return. Merging with traffic, I glanced slightly nervously down at the dash, praying that I wouldn't see any warning lights. I really need to get into the mechanic soon, as soon as I have the money anyways. The 30-year-old sedan was on the ragged edge of drivability, to the point that I didn't dare drive it out of town. I was terrified the moment that I got off the bridge and a mile or two down the isolated coastal highway that connects home to the outside world, I would end up stranded. And making less than $12,000 a year means money needs to go more to rent, lights and food than car repairs. But she had served me well so far. Better than the modern trucks and cars that my neighbors were dumb enough to buy every few years. Even still, I was at least thankful that it was the only thing that seemed to change here. The rest of the isolated Oregon town was perpetually frozen in time. The houses all remained the same stores lined the streets, and the same faces that I had grown used to seeing were always where I had hoped they would be. Picking up my medication and a frozen pizza for dinner, I window shopped for a little while, seeing the happy faces of teenagers, adults, and elderly couples alike, enjoying the 64-degree weather. The positivity was infectious, and I couldn't help but stay around them for a bit, eventually leaving with the smile on my face that remained as I drove back home and shoved the pizza into the oven. It wasn't until close to 8 after I had watched a movie that Brett's prank post had resurfaced in my mind. Chuckling again, I picked up my phone from the coffee table and I flicked on the screen. Just as I thought, there were message and notifications from him waiting for me. I grinned, tapping them as I prepared to read an excessive amount of LOLs and gloating about how he had got me for a minute. But instead, I found myself reading a deluge of short, increasingly hostile messages. Who the hell is this? I said, who the hell is this? Is this one of Dalton's family? Answer me. All the good vibes from the day deflated like a child's abandoned party balloon as I continued to scroll down. Oh, you son of a... You hacked my friend's account. What's wrong with you? Get a life and don't ever message me again. What in the world? I whispered, my eyebrows furrowing in confusion. What is up with him? This wasn't like him at all. Something had to be up. Quickly, I typed out a message to him, seeing the green online bubble next to his name. Dude, what the hell? Nobody's hacked my account. Take a chill pill. Is everything alright? I didn't even have time to close out of the app before I saw that it had been read. The 3 bubbles appeared, showing he was typing a reply. A moment later it appeared and I felt my confusion spike to new levels. Oh, get lost, you loser. Don't try and pretend that you're him. Quickly I replied, Dude, I promise it's me. Are you at home? I'll video call you to prove it. The reply was almost instantaneous. I said, get lost. The all-caps message made me recoil as if I had been physically slapped. In all the time that I had known Brett, he had never acted like this towards me. Now he was treating me like I was either a complete stranger or the punchline to the cruelest joke that he had ever played. Is he drunk? Deciding that I would try and get one of our other friends to check on him to make sure that he was okay, I found my chat with Eva, noting with a small pang of guilt that it had been months since I had messaged her last. I know I'm not the fondest of social media, but I really need to keep up contact with my friends outside of town. That's how you drift apart. Deciding that I wanted to do something other than type, I quickly left her a voice message. Eva, hey, look, I'm really sorry that I haven't hit you up in, 5 months now. You know me, I get busy out in the real world, and I forget to even check my messages on here. I promise that we'll catch up soon, but right now I need a favor. Brett's acting seriously weird, and I don't know what's up with him. Could you maybe message him? Or if you get some similar weirdness, actually go to his place and check on him. I don't know if Bella left him and he decided to get drunk or something, but this just isn't like him. I'll get into the details later. Thanks, and again, we'll talk soon. I love ya. Releasing the button and making sure that it sent, I looked again at the screaming profanity that almost seemed to leap off the screen. Involuntarily, I shuddered at it and quickly exited the app, wanting to let the real, sane world reassert itself. Sighing, I turned and saw the orange glow of the sun framed in my kitchen window. Standing up and walking to it, I craned my neck and looked towards the estuary and Pacific beyond. The sky almost seemed the color of my favorite cocktail, with its orange and reddish hues, and I found myself smiling slightly at it. That's beautiful. I should honestly get a picture of that. I'm pulling on a flannel shirt over my bare chest. I stepped outside onto the balcony facing the water and I raised my phone. I snapped one and then seeing it was quickly beginning to slip away, I impulsively switched it to selfie mode and I positioned myself in front of it. I gave it my usual half smile before watching the sun disappear on the horizon. Feeling the call of the Sandman to my bed, I took a moment to open Facebook back up, uploading both pictures and updating my profile picture with the selfie. At least now it isn't showing that horrible haircut that I had in 2019. Walking back inside, I tossed the phone onto the couch and walked into the bedroom, changing into a pair of pajama bottoms and climbing into bed. I wound up and set the alarm on my clock. Then for a few minutes, I stared up at the ceiling, watching the shape of the bare tree branches outside shift around in the wind. As they shifted in one direction, the branches seemed to transform into skeletal hands, reaching out across the ceiling. Normally it wouldn't have bothered me, but after the weird interaction with Brett, which despite my slightly better mood was still battering around in my head like a pinball, I couldn't help but shiver at them. I turned away on my side, facing the wall and slowly allowing my eyes to close and feeling the waking world rapidly fall away from me. The next morning, I quickly dressed and got ready to head off to my shift at the lumberyard. I grabbed my phone on my way out the door, but I didn't even bother to look at it. I would deal with everything on my lunch break. I waved to Mr. Dieter as I passed by the hardware store, smiling at the elderly man stopped wheeling the open sign out onto the sidewalk to beam and return the gesture. And the first few hours of my shift passed by uneventfully. Aside from a moment of pure panic, when my boss had selected one of us to drive to the next town to pick up the order sheet for this week's delivery, I had often been deferred due to the condition of my car. But Travis had warned me lately that he couldn't do so much longer, as it wasn't fair to the others. Eventually I would have to do it. Internally, and admittedly slightly bitter, I snorted as he turned his back to me. How about you do it for a change like you're actually supposed to, and grab a frickin' salad next time before you go Gandolfini on us all. Thankfully this time around I went to Carl and so I was able to return to my job of operating the forklift, moving wood around the yard for the next truck, before the 2 p.m. whistle signaled our lunch break. Retrieving the sandwich and the soda from my car that I had bought at Subway that morning, I settled in one of the empty break rooms and I began to eat. As I did, the thought of yesterday entered my mind, and I decided that while I had some time and privacy, I would check to see if either Eva had replied to me or Brett had come to his senses. Taking a sip of Coke, I fished it out of my pocket and I turned on the screen. To my immense relief, I saw that I had a message waiting from Eva and I tapped on it, opening up the chat. I saw that she had done the same thing that I had and sent me a voice note, one about a minute or so long. I quickly popped a few chips into my mouth, chewing as I imagined what she would tell me. I decided to get it over with and I tapped for it to begin playing. You disgusting lowlife. My head snapped up as Eva's voice, one that I had never heard speak to anyone with harsher than a soft reproach, hissed with barely contained venom through the speaker. You utter piece of crap. How dare you use the voice of somebody that I love this way? How dare you use that disgusting deepfake stuff to mimic it, to post a photo of him? Do you have any idea what kind of fresh wounds you're tearing open? Do you know what it's doing to his friends? To me? My eyes widened as a mixture of shock and utter disbelief flooded my system. Brett was one thing. While it was screwed up, I could explain him as either having gone too far with a bad joke, or taking pain out on somebody due to a breakup. But Eva, she was the last person that I would have ever expected this from. And more to the point, the venom in her voice, it wasn't fabricated. It was genuine. Every word she hissed out felt like a knife to my heart. As I recalled growing up back in New Hampshire together, going to school together and only ever seeing her smile at me. Duncan, another one of our friends, had whispered to me one night that she secretly had a crush on me, that I could tell over the years and never went away. But I didn't want to ruin our friendship, and so I never made a move. The woman that I was hearing swear and berate me seemed like a different woman entirely. And she continued, "Don't you ever message me again. Don't you try voice calling me or nothing. Brett warned me about you when I messaged him earlier. We're gonna make sure you can't do this to any of his friends again." Her voice seemed to gather even more venom in it as her tone raised to almost a shout. Normally, I wouldn't say something as messed up as I'm about to, but in this case, I'll make an exception for a piece of crap like you. Go drink Drano, you worthless excuse for a human. Get lost and stop treating the memory of a dead friend like it's your personal toy. The voice note ended, leaving me with only the sound of the ventilation system for company. My lunch lay forgotten on the table. All I could do was stare straight ahead at the wall, at the small rectangular window near the ceiling as Eva's final sentence kept replaying in my mind. Stop treating the memory of a dead friend like it's your personal toy. Dead friend? A chill ran up my spine as the only words I could think came to me, barely coming out in a whisper. What is going on? I barely managed to get through the rest of my shift without internally losing it. The two words kept burning a hole into the back of my consciousness, no matter how hard I tried to push them away. At one point, I paused and looked down at my arm, and unable to keep the feeling of insects from crawling under my skin at bay, I reached out and I pinched the skin. After a moment, I felt pain, letting go to see 2 red marks from my fingernails. I shook my head. I don't know what the hell is happening, but I know that I'm not dead. Dead people can't feel pain. Even still, fueled by all the horror movies that I had grown up watching, the small but potent bit of doubt, and as much as I wanted to ignore it, dread, it kept eating away at me. It remained there as my shift ended, and I climbed into my car to drive home. I decided to stop at the small grocery store a block or so away from my apartment to again grab a pre-made meal for dinner. Obviously, I didn't feel like cooking anything tonight. As I got out of my car and I walked into the store, I found myself watching everyone I went past far more closely than I ever had before. I looked to see if any of them would seemingly not notice me, or worse, would walk right through me. But as I grabbed a basket and moved first to the freezers, then the alcohol section to grab a much-needed bottle of watermelon margarita, everyone I saw moved out of my way as I walked towards them. Many of them turned their faces up to make sure that they didn't run into me, and our eyes would often meet. Seeing the recognition in their eyes as I heard the soft sound of the ancient music playing over the speakers, helped quickly relieve a good portion of the tension that had coiled around my inside. But it didn't completely erase the underlying feeling of dread that had followed me from the lumber yard like a specter. As I approached the cash registers, I noticed that one of my local friends, a tall, dark-haired dude wearing glasses, was standing wait in one aisle that had no customers. Moving quickly to it, I called out a greeting. "Hey Conrad, you open?" He looked up, and after a second, he smiled, waving me over. Hey Dalton, yep, I'm open, come on over, buddy." Setting the basket down, I removed the fajita chicken stir-fry and bottle of margarita, and I placed them on the belt, handing him the basket. "So how have you been? We've been on different schedules recently. Haven't seen you working again till now." He chuckled. "Yeah, I could say the same about you. Yeah, management has us on a new rotation. I've only just got back my regular shift recently. What about you? How was your day?" I grimaced slightly at having to remember the events of the last 2 days, but I answered honestly. "It's been a bit of a weird day, to say the least. Hopefully tomorrow will be better." I didn't go into details, especially with the other customers and cashier less than 15 feet away. He nodded sympathetically and then gestured to my items. "Yeah, I feel that. You want a bag for this?" I nodded, and then as he slid the dinner and drink into a plastic bag, an almost overwhelming need to ask him something flooded into me. "Hey, can I ask you what may seem like a bit of a weird question, man?" He stopped mid-action as he was turning back to the computer, tilting his head slightly at me with a curious expression. After a moment, he shrugged. "Shoot," he said. I took a deep breath, feeling both foolish and afraid of what I had to vocalize. I'm not dead, am I?" The question came out with a small shake to my voice. I could tell that he was not prepared for the question. He pulled back slightly, his eyes blinking rapidly behind his glasses, as if he were a computer being fed new information. A look that personified the phrase, "What in the hell?" crossed his features. Finally, after a moment, and a glance towards the back of the store where the manager's office was, he leaned over the counter and lightly smacked my shoulder before answering. "You seem perfectly alive and solid to me. Unless you're a zombie." His joke did it. I couldn't help but laugh as I felt the last wisps of whispering dread and tension escape out of the open sliding doors into the night. Unable to resist, I raised my arms out in front of me and moaned like I was in a George Romero flick. "Brains," I muttered, causing him to snort. "Oh, that's Return of the Living Dead, not Night of the Living Dead, you dolt," he chided. Shrugging my shoulders and grinning, I gestured to him. "And you seem perfectly alive as well." He mirrored my shrug as he looked back at the computer. "Hey, as far as I know, I'm fine. I'm better than that guy who got nailed on the side of the road a few months ago, though. Poor guy didn't even see the logging truck in the rain. Anyways, that'll be 1875. I pulled up my wallet, only half focused as I fumbled in it for a 20. Conrad's words had piqued my interest, as morbid as it was. Somebody got splattered around here. I never caught anything about it on the news or the radio. You know if it was a local or somebody passing through?" At my question, he seemed to freeze in front of the register, his finger poised to open the till. After a moment, he laughed. "Ah, damn it to all hell, man. I had it on the tip of my tongue, but it slipped my mind. I don't know, but I hate when that happens." The register let out a ding as it shot open, and he began to rummage in it for my change. I shrugged and slapped the counter. "No, it's all good, man. Same thing happens to me more than I care to admit." He laughed. seeming to relax himself as he handed me my change and receipt, nodding gratefully at me. I picked up my bag and was about to turn away when something caught my eye. "Hey dude, when did you get that scar on your neck?" Conrad froze. For more than a few moments, he simply stared at me, a slightly odd, indescribable expression splashing on his face. I couldn't understand why, but seeing it as he slowly raised a hand to the side of his neck, his fingers tracing over the moon-shaped scar caused me to take a step back. He blinked a few times, his eyes seeming to glaze over, and then he snorted and chuckled, snapping back to the present. "Oh, yeah, one thing that I forgot to mention to you. Couple of months ago during the day, we had one of those homeless junkies run up in here and try and rob the place. I was on, and unfortunately for me, I was also the only cashier on at the time." He winced before finishing. "Yeah, luckily he only nicked me with the box cutter that he had. I barely felt it, just cold for a second. Thankfully, somebody called the cops, so I only had to fend him off for about a minute. Perks of working in a neighborhood called Methpire, huh?" I winced at the image of somebody coming at me with a blade, and then I let out a silent thanks that somebody had been watching out for my friend that day. I raised my hand as I turned away. "Hey, you'll have to tell me more about it the next time that we hang out. Anyways, I'm going home. Night. Have a good one." I heard him call after me as I walked out into the night. A few hours later, and I found myself sprawled out onto the couch, slightly tipsy from the now mostly empty bottle of margarita sitting on the kitchen counter. On TV, an old movie from the 60s was playing, though I was only half paying attention. My hand, almost on its own accord, drifted over to the end table next to me, and I found myself picking up my phone. The screen flickered to life and I saw a new notification had shown up. More than slightly loaded, I let out a drawn-out groan. "Oh, great," I slurred, tapping on it. Just as I was beginning to feel like things were getting back to normal. Now what? The Facebook opened, and I saw a post had been made to my wall by Brett. My exasperation grew and I tapped the notification. The page had taken a moment longer than normal to load. Finally, it popped up and I let out a gasp of exasperated laughter. I was staring at a wall of text in all caps. Pulling myself to a sitting position and feeling the room spin slightly, I ran a face over my hand, and then I grabbed the remote and muted the TV as I squinted to focus on the words. Warning, hacker alert. To any of Dalton's friends, Eva and I need to warn you of a hacker that has taken over his account. The two of us have both received messages claiming to be him, with Eva getting a voice note that was mimicking his voice. This is very cruel play, and I don't wish to cause anybody any pain, but we needed to warn you. This hacker clearly has access to deepfake technology that allows him to simulate his voice and create pictures of him, as the new profile picture shows. Under no circumstances should you interact with him if he attempts to contact you, whether it is a message or a voice note, or even a video call. Do not reply to him. Ignore it. We are currently working with his family and Facebook to get his account memorialized and boot him out of it. I'm sorry, but it needed to be warned. Thank you and rest in peace, Dalton. The amount of exasperation and disbelief that spiked as I read and reread the post, seeing the emoji reactions with angry and sad faces at the bottom, was quickly joined by a new emotion. Anger. I stumbled to my feet, moving to the kitchen as I began to breathe heavily, the alcohol allowing me to literally begin seeing red. You gotta be kidding me, I hissed, clutching the side of the stove. This has gone too far. I don't know what's going on, but they are not bringing my family into this crap. I slammed down on the metal stove with a fist, not caring if it was past 10, and I would likely get a complaint from my neighbors. I raised my phone and tapped quickly on the contact app, scrolling down until I had reached the M section. Like hell they're going to subject my poor mother to this. A moment later, I heard the sound of the line ringing and I brought the phone to my ear. I knew that I was likely going to wake her up, but I would rather deal with an irritated mother than the alternative. After a few rings, the line picked up. Hello? For a moment, I froze. Mom hadn't sounded like she had just woken up. She sounded as if she hadn't slept in weeks. Worry instantly flooded me, but I kept it at bay just for now. As soon as I explained what was happening, I would ask her what was wrong. For now, though, I'd try to keep the slur out of my voice as much as I could. Hey, Mom, it's me. Look, I hate to call you so late, but I needed to let you know something. Just give me a moment to explain before you say anything. I don't know what the heck is going on, but something really messed up is happening online. People on there are either playing some really screwed up game or have completely lost their minds. I've been getting people saying things that I would rather not repeat, and I'll go into more detail when it's not almost 11 at night. And I'm not a little drunk, but if any of them get a hold of you, please just ignore whatever they say to you, alright? I just don't need them upsetting you. Finished, I allowed myself to stay quiet, to give her a moment to process what I would say. The silence on the other end of the line seemed to stretch longer than I thought it would. If it weren't for the fact that I could faintly hear the sound of her TV in the background, I would have almost have thought that the line had disconnected. Who is this? I froze at the question, one which had been spoken in barely a whisper. My brain short-circuited and I lost my capacity to speak for a few seconds as confusion swept over me like a tsunami. What? I managed out. The question came again. Who is this? This time I answered immediately. Mom, it's me. It's Dalton. The sound that came from the other end of the line after another long stretch of silence seemed to tear me from my intoxication. The sound of my mother letting out what I can only describe as a heart-wrenching sob, one that I had never heard her utter in my life. When she spoke again, I could tell that she was barely able to speak through tears. Whoever this is cruel. This is cruel. I felt as though the room were beginning to spin. This time it was for a completely different reason than alcohol. I felt like I had finally snapped, like I was completely losing my mind. My mother, my own mother, was almost in tears at the sound of my voice, and to hear her call me cruel felt like somebody had stabbed me in the heart. When I began to speak next, my voice was openly shaking. Mom, I don't understand. What is? She cut me off before I had a chance to finish my question, and the words she spoke made me feel as though my heart hadn't just been stabbed. It felt as if it had been ripped out. You're not my son. My mouth dropped open, and I pulled the phone back to stare at it for a moment before bringing it back to my ear. It took a few times to muster my will to speak. What are you saying? I managed out in barely a whisper. I felt terrified of what she'd say to me, terrified that she wouldn't say anything and hang up. I couldn't understand. What had I done to make everybody act like this towards me? She did answer. You're not my son, whoever you are. She said, her voice still breaking, but with the same firmness that I remembered hearing whenever I had done something wrong and got sent to my room. I began to open my mouth again, but I never had time to say anything. She spoke again, and what she said made me feel as if the bottom had just dropped out of the world. "You're not my son. My son died 4 months ago." It was as if every thought that I had, every emotion was wiped out in a single second. The world stopped spinning, as did the feeling of losing my mind. But what took its place made me wish that I could have the insane feeling back. Dread is soul-crushing dread. I pulled the phone away from my ear to stare at it. Faintly on the other end of the line, I heard Mom break into another sob before speaking again. "Don't call this number again." A moment later, the line clicked off. The phone slipped from my hand and it fell to the floor. I barely even noticed it. Nor did I notice the loud crash as my hand swept the bottle of margarita off the counter, shattering and spilling the remaining red liquid across the imitation tile. I was beginning to shake, first gently and then violently. My breathing quickened until it felt like I was hyperventilating and about to pass out at any second. I looked around at the walls as I stumbled back into the living room, my mind racing. What the hell? What the hell? What is going on? This isn't happening. This is not happening. I'm not dead. I'm not dead. I would know if I died. I pinched myself earlier and it hurt. I hit the edge of the couch with my legs, my knees buckling as I slid to the floor against it. I forced myself to speak aloud, in some vain attempt to regain my composure. No, I'm alive. I know that I'm alive. I get up, I go to work, I get paid. I've gone to work the last 4 months, not just hung around the apartment. Yeah, I know I'm a bit of a shut-in, but wait, other people saw me. Conrad in the store. Yeah, he saw me. The other customers saw me too. My neighbor and Mr. Dieter waved at me. Travis even spoke too. It felt as though somebody had thrown an ice-cold bucket of water at my face. My arms dropped to my sides as a thought wormed forward into my mind. A singular thought that made the room feel as though it were beginning to spin again. Wait, Travis? No, that can't be right. I couldn't have talked to Travis because, well, Travis. I began to shake again as I tried to force away the end of that thought. But try as hard as I might, I couldn't keep myself from whispering it aloud. Travis died of a heart attack last year. Along with that, it came another thought. Another crystal clear one that made me pull my legs tight up against me, trying to stop myself from shaking. And Mr. Dieter, he died 5 years ago. Yet another horrifying dot connected in my mind. I hadn't seen Conrad in 4 months, and only just tonight came across him, after he had told me about his near miss with the robber. The world contracted in my vision and I forced my voice out, my voice shaking as hard as I was. I'm not dead. Right? The job paid $12 an hour and it required a pulse. That was about the full extent of the qualifications. I had been out of work for almost 3 months when I got the call from Bev Norris at Crestwood Valley Mall. I had applied to so many jobs by that point that I didn't even remember submitting the application. She left a voicemail while I was asleep, and I called her back from my kitchen while I was still half awake. And 20 minutes later, I had the job. Night security, alone, 6 nights a week. My name is Cal, and I'm 34. I grew up about 40 minutes from Crestwood, and I've been to that mall maybe 100 times in my life. Birthday parties when I was a kid, the arcade in the back corner, and the food court with the little Sbarro that my mom loved. I knew the place the way everybody around here knew it, which is to say that I remembered it the way that it used to be, not the way that it actually was anymore. I drove out from my first shift on a Tuesday in February, and the parking lot alone was enough to get under my skin. It was enormous, built to hold thousands of cars, and there were maybe 30 scattered across it like loose change on a table. Security lights on tall poles that cast everything in that yellow-orange glow that makes the world look like an old photograph. The building itself was massive and low and dark, with a few lit signs near the main entrance that buzzed and flickered. And Bev met me at the side entrance. She was a short woman in her late 50s with reading glasses pushed up on her head and a permanent expression of mild exhaustion. She handed me a radio, a flashlight, a key ring with what felt like 40 keys on it, and a laminated sheet with the names and phone numbers of people to call in various situations. She walked me through the rounds, which took about 20 minutes to explain and about 45 minutes to actually complete. The mall had 2 levels. The upper level was where most of the remaining tenants were, mostly clustered near the east entrance. The lower level was storage and maintenance, and it had been mostly off-limits to tenants for going on 2 years due to some drainage issue that Bev described vaguely and moved past quickly. The whole time she was showing me around, I was taking in the place. I hadn't been inside in probably 8 years, and it had changed completely in the way that empty spaces change, which is to say that it had stopped feeling like a place where things happened and started feeling like the memory of one. The storefronts were dark and gutted. Some of them still had signage. A shoe store, a jewelry kiosk with the glass cases still in place, but nothing inside of them. A kids' clothing store with 3 plastic mannequins left behind, still dressed in clothes that had probably been there for 5 years. The main corridor was wide and the ceiling was high, and the skylights were dark with night, and the fountain in the center was dry, and it had been for a long time. And near the east corridor there was a carousel. It was covered with a large tarp, lashed down with bungee cords. Even under the tarp you could see these shapes of the horses, their heads and necks pressing against the fabric. I stared at it for a second, and Bev said, almost to herself, that it had been covered since the spring, and nobody could agree on who was responsible for doing something with it. She also pointed out the old arcade at the back of the upper level, tucked behind where the food court had ended. Galaxy Games, the sign above the entrance still said, though the G had gone dark so it just read Galaxy Games in flickering blue letters. The inside was completely dark. Most of the machines were still in there, she said, because the company that owned them had gone under before they could collect them, and the cost of removing them had become one of those things that nobody wanted to pay for. She pulled the door shut and said that I didn't need to go in there during rounds unless I heard something, and that sometimes the old machines made noise on their own because of the cold. At the end of the walkthrough, she almost forgot to give me the rules. She pulled them out of her desk drawer, a folded piece of paper, and handed it to me the way that you would hand somebody a takeout menu. She said the previous guard had left them and that she thought some of it was a little dramatic, but that it didn't hurt to know them. and then she put on her coat and left. I heard her car start in the parking lot and take off. I unfolded the paper and read it, standing at the security desk. There were 7 rules. They were handwritten in neat, careful block letters, like the person who wrote them had wanted to make sure that they were legible. 1. Do not enter the old J.C. Penney wing after 10 at night. 2. If you hear music from the food court, do not follow it. 3. If somebody waves at you from inside a dark storefront, do not wave back. 4. If you smell popcorn and can't find where it's coming from, sit down wherever you are, close your eyes and count to 60. Do not open them before you finish counting. 5. If you see a child inside the mall at night, call the police right away. Do not approach the child. 6. Stay out of the service corridors behind the stores after 11 at night. 7. Never go to the lower level alone, for any reason. I read it over twice, then I folded the paper and put it in my jacket pocket. I thought the previous guy had probably just worked too many nights alone in a creepy building, and had started filling in the silence with stories. I had done plenty of night shifts at a factory, and there's something about the dark and quiet that the brain doesn't like. It fills in the blanks. It makes things up. That first night was quiet. I did my rounds twice, I drank 2 cups of coffee from a thermos, and I watched half a movie on my phone. I drove home at 6 in the morning with the sky just starting to go gray, and thought about how the job was going to be mostly fine. Now I want to be precise about when things started feeling different, because it wasn't all at once. The first 4 nights were fairly quiet, but on the 5th night I smelled popcorn. It was sometime after midnight and I was on the upper level near the old shoe store when it hit me. It was strong and warm, the way that popcorn smells when you walk into a movie theater. That buttery salt smell that goes straight to some part of your brain that remembers being a kid. I stopped walking. I looked around. There was no source for it. The nearest occupied tenant was a cellular carrier store near the east entrance, and they had been closed since 9 o'clock. I thought about rule number 4. I thought how ridiculous it was. And then I sat down on the edge of the dry fountain, closed my eyes, and I counted to 60. It felt embarrassing, honestly. Sitting alone in a dark mall at midnight with my eyes closed, counting in my head like a child playing hide and seek. I got to 60 and I opened my eyes. The corridor looked the same. Dark storefronts, low light, the tarp-covered carousel down the way. But something felt different in a way that I couldn't explain. The way a room sometimes feels different after you've been in it for a long time. Like the air had settled. The popcorn smell was gone. I finished my rounds and told myself that it was probably just the ventilation system pulling something up from somewhere. Old buildings do weird things. That was what I told myself, and most of me believed it. The music happened on my 9th night. I was in the food court doing my pass-through when I heard it. Soft at first, coming from these ceiling speakers. The kind of music they used to play in malls everywhere. That soft, inoffensive 80s pop that just sort of existed in the background of every shopping trip that you ever took as a kid. I couldn't make out the song at first. I took a step toward the far end of the food court where these speakers seemed to be the strongest. I stopped. I stood completely still and I waited. The music kept playing, faint and smooth and oddly comforting. The way that a familiar smell is comforting. I had the strong urge just to walk toward it, to find the speaker that it was coming from and to figure out what was going on. I mean, there was no reason not to investigate. I was the security guard, and that was literally my job. But I had stood in a dark, empty mall at midnight and counted to 60 for no reason. And something had changed when I did. And so I stayed where I was. I stood in the food court with my hands in my pockets, and I listened to that music and didn't move. It played for maybe 4 minutes and then it stopped, right in the middle of a note like somebody had pulled a plug. The silence that replaced it was the kind that presses on your ears. I did the rest of my rounds quickly and I didn't go back to the food court until the next pass, and by then there was nothing. Just the chairs and tables and the long dark shuttered storefronts, and the smell of old grease that had soaked into everything over the decades. On my 11th night, the arcade came alive. I was finishing up the upper level pass, coming around the back end of the food court toward the Galaxy Games entrance, when I saw the light. Not a flashlight, not a thin beam of something that I could explain away. The entire inside of the arcade was flickering, machine by machine, like they were waking up in sequence. The glow coming from the entrance was blue and orange and green, old screen colors, the specific light of a dozen games cycling through their attract modes all at once. I stopped at the entrance. The machines were all going, Pac-Man, Galaga, one of the big racing cabinets near the back wall, a row of pinball machines along the left side, their play fields lit up and bumpers flashing. The sound was low but present. All those digital bleeps and chimes and engine noises layered together into something that should have been familiar but wasn't. It was familiar the way that a word looks wrong if you stare at it for too long. There was no power reason for any of this. The arcade had been disconnected from the tenant power grid when the operator had went under. Bev had told me that herself. But I stood at the entrance and watched the machines run their loops, and I thought about the rules. None of them said anything specifically about the arcade. None of them said not to go in, or don't look at the machines, or stay out after a certain time. There wasn't any rule about this, which meant either it had never happened when he was here, or he had never come back from it to write it down. That second thought sat in my chest like a cold stone. I was still standing there when I heard the laughter. It came from the back of the arcade, from somewhere past the racing cabinet and the rows of machines where the lights didn't quite reach. A child laughing, high and clear, the kind of laugh that belongs to somebody who's just won a game or has gotten a good score. The kind of sound that every single one of my instincts said to move toward. I didn't move. The laugh came again, a little closer this time, like whatever was making it had moved up one row of machines. I could hear it picking its way through the arcade, and somehow that was worse than if it had just been stationary. Something was moving in there, something that knew that I was at the entrance. And then one by one, the machines in the front row of the arcade went dark. And then the second row. Like the light was retreating toward the back, pulling away from me and whatever was in there retreating with it, drawing back, pulling the brightness away from the entrance and deeper into the arcade. I understood what it wanted me to do. It wanted me to walk in after it, follow the light and the laughter deeper into that space until I was far enough in that whatever waited at the back could do what it did. I turned around and I walked at a steady pace. I did not run. No way I was going in there. Behind me for about half a minute, I could still hear the laughter. It didn't sound angry or frustrated. It just kept going, light and easy, the sound of a kid having the best afternoon of their life in an arcade that had been dark and dead for years. By the time that I reached the main corridor, it had stopped. I sat on the edge of that dry fountain again and closed my eyes, and I counted to 60 without anybody telling me to. When I opened them, the mall was quiet. It was still, and I was alone in it. And the corridor back toward the food court was dark the whole way through. I added the arcade to my rounds as a visual check only, from the entrance and never inside. That felt like the right call. And nothing that happened afterward made me think that it was wrong. On the 12th night, I saw the girl. I was doing the East Corridor pass, coming up on the carousel, and I saw her standing about 10 feet from the covered horses. She was small, maybe 7 or 8 years old, wearing a puffy winter coat with a fur-trimmed hood, the kind that used to be popular when I was a kid. She was just standing there with her arms at her sides, facing me. My stomach dropped. There was no reason on earth for a child to be in this building at this hour. I pulled up my phone and called the non-emergency line, like Rule 5 had said to do. I kept my eyes on the girl while I talked to the dispatcher. I told them that there was a child alone in the mall. I gave my location and I stayed on the line. The whole time I watched the girl and she watched me, and neither of us moved. It took Officer Trent about 12 minutes to get there. I know because I was staring at my phone the whole time watching the clock. When I heard the door open and Trent's footsteps in the corridor, I looked away from the girl for maybe 2 seconds. And as you can guess it, when I looked back, she was gone. Trent scoped out the area with me and then did a loop on the main floor and didn't find anything. He was polite about it in the way that people are polite when they think you've wasted their time. He said that kids sometimes go into malls through prop-to-service doors and that it happened more often than people thought. He said to call back if I ever saw her again. After he left, I stood near the carousel for a long time. The tarp shifted a little in the draft from the heating vents, the horse-shaped lumps underneath pressing against the fabric. 2 nights later, I was sitting in the security office between rounds when I noticed the corkboard on the wall. It was covered in papers and business cards and a couple of printed photos, the kind of thing that accumulates in many offices over the years. I glanced at the photos. Most of them were pictures of the mall from what looked like the 80s or early 90s, the kind of shots you take when you're proud of a place. The mall full of people, the fountain running, the carousel going around and around, bright and lit up. Families all watching it and having a good time. I was almost done looking when I found the one near the carousel. It was a wide shot taken from the East Corridor. In the foreground, a couple of kids were pointing at the horses. In the background, standing just off to the side with her arms at her sides, was a small girl in a puffy winter coat with a fur-trimmed hood. I sat with that photo for a long time. The date printed on the bottom edge said March in 1988. I told myself that there were probably dozens of kids who had worn that same coat. I mean, it was pretty popular. It was nothing. But I didn't really believe that. And I think somewhere I'd stopped believing it when the music played and I felt that pull toward the food court and had understood, on some level, that I didn't want to look at it directly. That the pull hadn't been a curiosity. I asked Bev about the previous guard the next afternoon when she was doing a walkthrough of the tenant spaces. She was a practical woman who I'd mostly liked up until the moment that I had asked her about Denny Marsh. I had found his name on a laminated employee ID tacked near the security desk. The photo showed a heavy-set man in his mid-40s with a gray beard and a tired, kind smile. He looked like somebody's dad. When I said his name, Bev stopped walking. She didn't look at me right away, and then she said that Denny had been a good employee for 6 years, and that what had happened to him was a tragedy, and that she didn't like to talk about it. I pushed a little gently and she told me the basics. About 18 months ago, the morning crew had come in to find Denny's car in the lot. His round logs were up to date through 4 in the morning. But after that, nothing. No Denny. The police had looked into it for a while and never found an explanation. The case was technically still open. She told me this in a flat, reciting kind of voice, like something that she had said many times and wanted to say as few times going forward as possible. And then she changed the subject and walked me to the east anchor space to talk about a leak in the ceiling tiles. And I let her change the subject because there wasn't much else to say. That night before my shift, I sat in the security office and I looked at Denny's employee photo for a while. A gray beard, a tired smile. 6 years in this building at night, all alone. He had made those rules, every single one of them. And then one night he had been here and then he hadn't been here. And his car was still in the lot. I did my first round that night, earlier than usual. The JCPenney wing ran off the south end of the main corridor, a long straight stretch of empty storefronts leading to the old anchor space at the end, which had been gutted and dark for 3 years. It was the part of the mall that felt the emptiest, which was saying something. Even the lighting was worse in there. Some of the overhead fixtures had given out without anybody bothering to replace them. I had been in the wing on my rounds before, but always before 10. Always quick and always in and out. On my 15th night, I was coming up in the entrance to the JCPenney wing at around 10:30 when I saw the figure. It was standing at the far end of the wing, in front of the dark anchor space doors. Too far to make out clearly, but it was human-shaped and facing me, and it was standing still. I realized that I had taken 2 or 3 steps into the wing without deciding to. I stopped. The figure didn't move. It just stood there at the end of that long, dark corridor, and I stood at the near end, and the distance between us was maybe 100 yards of empty mall. I backed out of the wing back into the main corridor, and I stood in the light for a while. My heart was doing something uncomfortable in my chest. After a minute, I thought about what I had seen, about the shape of the figure, the build of the jacket, and I went back to the security office. I looked at Denny Marsh's employee photo. I didn't finish my rounds that night. I sat in the security office until 6 in the morning and I didn't leave it. I want to tell you about the night with the vision because it's the hardest thing to explain. Not because of what I saw, but because of how real it was, and because of how close I came to not coming back from it. It was my 18th night. I was doing a round of the main corridor near the dry fountain. It was late, maybe around 2 in the morning. I was really tired that night, so much so that everything had that slightly unreal quality to it. Pair that with an old abandoned mall and it makes sense. The popcorn smell hit me hard and fast, not gradual like before but immediate, like walking through a door into a different room. I reached for rule 4 in my head and I was actually starting to sit down on the edge of the fountain when the mall had changed. I don't have a better word for it, but it changed. One moment I was in the Crestwood Valley Mall of right now, dark and empty and half dead. And then I was transported back to the mall of 1989, and it was 3 in the afternoon on a busy Saturday. The lights were blazing. Every store was open and lit up and full of people. I could hear the fountain behind me, the water running, the coins glinting in it. The carousel was going around and around, horses moving up and down. A little girl in a puffy coat watching it with her hands together. The ceiling speakers were playing something that I remembered from when I was young. One of those songs that just always had been there in the background of your life. The smell of these Sbarro hit me, pizza and garlic, and underneath it, the popcorn from the cart near the east entrance, and the perfume from the department store. All of it together was so specifically right that my chest ached with something that took me a second to recognize as longing. People moved past me. A teenager talking on a payphone near the service corridor. A family with a stroller. The dad holding shopping bags in both hands. 2 older women with mall walker sneakers moving briskly down the corridor. None of them looked at me. None of them reacted to me. But they were there. I could almost feel the air displacement as they passed by. And from the back of the upper level past the food court, the arcade was blazing. Full color, full sound, every machine running. A crowd of kids in acid-wash jeans clustered around the racing cabinets and the pinball machines, their laughter carrying all the way down the main corridor. I could see it from where I was standing. That warm glow, and I wanted to walk to it the way that you want to walk toward a fire in the cold. And deep down, I knew that it wasn't real. I want to be clear about that. Some part of me, some small, clear part, was screaming that this was not real. But my body didn't know that. My body was already moving, following the flow of foot traffic and drifting east, drifting toward the carousel and the little girl, and the light and the sound of those kids in the arcade laughing at whatever was on the screen in front of them. What brought me back was the tarp. My hand had caught the edge of it, that rough, synthetic fabric, and the texture of it was completely wrong for 1989. Wrong for the bright, crowded Saturday afternoon. Wrong for everything that the vision was telling me. I grabbed it hard, got a hold of it, and held on. I closed my eyes and I counted to 60. Slowly and carefully, really focusing on each number. I counted past 60 all the way up to 100. When I opened my eyes, I was standing in the dark and empty mall, both hands gripping the tarp over the carousel, and the JCPenney wing entrance was about 30 feet ahead of me. I had walked 30 feet without knowing that I was walking. I sat down on the floor right there in the corridor, and I stayed down until my hands had stopped shaking. Then I got up and went back to the security office, and I sat in there and I thought seriously about how to find a different job. I decided to call it quits the next morning. I know that might sound like the obvious choice looking back, but I had about $200 in my account and no other prospects. And the process of choosing to leave something that you need is more complicated than people who have never been broke understand. But I decided I would tell Bev at the end of the shift. I would ask for my last paycheck and I would figure out the rest of it. I walked to the parking lot at the end of my shift and I got in my car and turned the key and got nothing. Not a sputter, not a click. Complete silence. The battery was dead. It had been fine the night before, but it was dead now. I called a friend who lived about 25 minutes away and he said that he would come with jumper cables, but that he was still in bed and it would probably be an hour, maybe more. I told him that that was fine. I went back inside because it was February and standing in that parking lot was not an option. I told myself that it was just a fluke. I told myself that these things happen. I was just going to go sit in the security office and wait until my friend was going to come and jump the car, and I was going to drive away from this place and never come back. And that's what I was trying to do. I was sitting in the security office with a cup of coffee watching something on my phone when the music had started from the food court. I turned my phone off and I sat still. And then I smelled the popcorn. And then from somewhere down the back of the upper level, from the direction of the arcade, I heard it. Children laughing. The same way that it had sounded before. That high, easy sound that carried all the way down the corridor and through the walls, and it sat in the middle of my chest like a hand pressing inward. More than one voice this time, a group of them. All three at once, and even though I knew what was happening, even though I understood by now that each one of these things was a lure, a hook designed for a specific instinct, the combined weight of all three was tremendous. My whole body wanted to get up and move, the urge to investigate, to help, to follow the familiar comfort of that smell and that sound. It was almost physical. It pressed on me from all sides. I did not get up. I counted again in my head 3 times in a row, eyes open, staring at the wall across from me. The laughter kept going for a while. It would shift in pitch, sometimes sounding closer and sometimes farther away, like it was moving through the upper level in a slow loop, working its way around the food court, drifting toward the main corridor. I understood that it was testing the distance, seeing how close it could get before I moved. When I finally stopped counting, the laughter had faded, but the smell of popcorn was still there, faint but present, like it was still waiting. And then something moved past the window of the security office. The office had a window that looked out into the main corridor, a wide pane of glass that Denny had probably used to watch for shoplifters back when they were still shoplifters. I was looking right at it when the figure passed in front of it. It moved slowly, and it was the right height, the right build. The gray beard was visible even in the dim corridor light, and the jacket was the same one that Denny was wearing in his photo. It stopped just past the window, and then slowly, it turned its head toward me. Its eyes found mine through the glass. I've tried a lot of times since that night to describe what was wrong with its face, and the best that I can do is this. It looked like somebody had assembled it carefully from the right pieces and then gotten the timing slightly off. The proportions were correct, but something about the way that it held itself, the way that its face settled into an expression, it was wrong in a way that went past wrong into something that made my whole nervous system light up at once. It looked at me through the window, and I looked back. I thought about his rules. I ran through all 7 of them in my head one by one, and I understood them differently than I had before. Each one was a wall against a specific kind of movement. Don't follow the music, don't approach the child, don't follow the smell, don't go into the dark wing, don't follow the laughter from the arcade. Each one existed because the hollow, whatever it was, whatever lived beneath this building in the old limestone dark, understood exactly how humans were built, and to use that knowledge the way that you use a key. It found the door in you that matched the key that it had, and it turned it. It couldn't reach up and take anyone. I was certain of that. It could only lead. It could only pull. Every lure that it made required you to walk toward it on your own 2 feet, and the rules existed to keep you from doing that. I went through all 7, and then I noticed something cold and simple. None of the rules had addressed the door. There was nothing in Denny's list about what to do if something knocked. The thing outside my window raised its hand and it knocked on the glass. 3 times, slow and deliberate. I held very still. It knocked again. It watched me with that slightly off face and the eyes that were almost right. I thought about Denny. 6 years that he had worked here. 6 years of following those rules and building that list, adding to it every time he found a new edge of the thing's territory. 6 years of knowing that it was under this building, and that it was patient, and that it would never stop. And at the end of those 6 years, his car was in the parking lot and he was somewhere else, not somewhere that I could find him. I thought about what that meant, and then I sat in the security office with my hands flat on the desk, and I watched the thing that looked like Denny knock on my window, and I did not open the door. It knocked for a long time. It tried the handle twice. It stood at the window and watched me with its assembled face and its eyes, and I sat across from it and watched it back, and neither of us moved. Somewhere around 5 in the morning, the light had started to change. Not fast, just gradually, the way it does in February when dawn comes reluctant and gray. The skylights above began to show the first thin light. The thing outside the window stopped knocking. It stood there for a minute or two just watching me, and then it turned and walked away down the corridor toward the south end of the mall, and I watched it until it was out of sight. I stayed in the office until I heard my friend's truck in the parking lot. He jumped the car and I thanked him, and I drove home and I slept for about 10 hours. When I woke up, it was dark again, and I lay in bed for a while thinking about what I was going to do. I mean, I needed the job, that was still true. Nothing about the previous night had changed that particular fact of my life. I lay there and I did the math that I had already done a dozen times, and I came to the same answer that I always came to. I went back. Bev was doing paperwork when I came in. She handed me a coffee without being asked and went back to her papers. I went to the security desk and started my pre-shift checks the way that I always did. I don't know exactly why I looked at that corkboard again. Maybe just out of habit. I had looked at it every shift since I had found that 1988 photo, always half expecting to see something different. And this time something was different. There was a new photo pinned near the top. It was a wide shot of the main corridor in what looked like a busy afternoon, sometime in the late 80s, based on the clothes and the storefronts. Dozens of people moving through the mall in both directions, the fountain running, the carousel spinning. I almost moved on, and then I looked at the background. Near the fountain, barely visible behind a group of teenagers, was a figure standing completely still while everybody around them moved. Modern jacket, modern work boots, a flashlight clipped to his belt. It was me. I looked at the date printed on the bottom edge of the photo. April 1988. I've thought about it every night since. I think about the thing that looked like Denny knocking on the glass while I held still and counted until dawn. I think about what that photo means. Whether it's a thread or a record or just the hollow showing me that it's patient. That it measures time differently than I do. That 6 years or 30 years or 100 years are all the same distance from where it waits. I still follow the rules, all 7 of them, every night without exception. I just added one more. Rule 8. If something knocks, do not open the door. Back when I was in high school, we had to move on short notice. It was just me and my mom, and she was struggling to keep a job down. After getting tagged with a DWI, we ended up moving in with my aunt in the projects. It was the only way to make ends meet. It was by far my lowest point. I slept on the couch in the living room while my mom took the bedroom. My aunt spent most of her time at her boyfriend's place anyway, so she was rarely around. It was rough to say the least. Everything can be rough at that age, but changing schools and getting thrown down a couple rungs on the class ladder was a bad combo. I was a pretty normal kid. I played a lot of basketball, but I had no hopes of going pro. I had no idea what I was going to do. College was a pipe dream, so it was mostly about passing my classes and hoping for a miracle. Or a job. A job works too. The area was pretty bad. One corner shop with welded windows and half a dozen handwritten signs stapled to the front door. No carts or baskets. A wall of pictures by the entrance showing who's barred from entry. One of them had a little blue cross sign painted on with a faded RIP beneath. There was this sandwich place that must have been there since the 70s. The place was tiny with a lowercase t. I've seen refrigerator boxes that are bigger. Basically a door where you can hear somebody talking on the phone with a sign that says, "Yeah, we're open." Only 2 items on the menu. Meat or no meat. I got nothing bad to say about that place though. Mr. Barker's sandwiches are, to this day, the best damn street food that I've ever had. I've tried recreating his pickled garlic salsa for years, but I can't get the zest right. And then there was the high school. There were metal detectors and one of our teachers openly smoked in the classroom. The less that I say about that place, the better. All that aside, it wasn't like you couldn't live there. I mean, yeah, it wasn't pretty. You can sort of feel the eyes on your neck when you walk down the wrong street. But once you learn what street you're not supposed to walk down, you're gonna be okay. It's not the kind of place where somebody gets shot every day. I mean, it happens, but it's not as random and sudden as people from the city think. You know who's gonna be trouble by the look of them. There had been a couple of ideas on how to revitalize the area. There was an office at the far end that they tried to make into a sort of mini hotel. The kind of cheap place that second-grade tourists stay at when they want the authentic experience. The place lasted for a couple of years but closed by the time that we moved in down the street. There were still signs up when we got there, so it wouldn't surprise me if some folks got tricked into thinking that it was still open. I wouldn't say that I had any friends really, not at first. I had some guys that I knew and that I knew wouldn't mess with me without a good reason. And there was Kieran, for example. Pretty stand-up guy and we made a good team on the court. There was Holland, tallest guy in the class. Nice but a bit slow. And his hand-eye coordination was shot to shit. The guy could barely spell his name, but without him we couldn't play 3-on-3. There were a couple of others too, but most of them just blended into the background. When I had lived there for about 3 months, there was a new push for revitalization. They put up new streetlights. Or at least, that's what we thought. The first time that I saw them was on a Thursday night. People were out and about, somebody was playing music and I could hear somebody yelling and whooping, but I couldn't make out which apartment that it came from. I had homework to do and I wasn't feeling very social. My mom and aunt were out, leaving me to watch TV and procrastinating over equations. I remember looking out the living room window, only to see a streetlight. At first, I didn't think about it, until I realized that I had never seen one there before. That had been a problem for my mom when we first got here. She didn't feel safe without them. At some point, the city must have fixed them. It was right there, as bright as ever. I watched a guy come wandering down the street and stopping underneath that light, looking up at it. He raised his hand to shield his eyes. He seemed to be a bit out of it, so maybe he just didn't register what the hell he was looking at. And then the streetlight went out. Just minutes after first spotting it, I blinked, adjusting my eyes. There was no man there anymore. He was gone. Over the next few days, I would see the occasional streetlight here and there. Rarely the same one and rarely for a long time. It's as if they just came on momentarily and only a few at a time. It felt appropriate in a way. Of course, the city would mess up trying something new. No good deed goes unpunished. And people around school were talking about it too. It was a known fact that the only streetlights that actually worked were the ones near the school, so to see any others was noteworthy. Not just because it was something new, but because it seemed inconsistent. They weren't the only thing that happened around the neighborhood lately. For example, there was a full wall where they had cleaned up the graffiti. They had put in new windows in a couple of buildings. They had moved one of the broken down cars in the lot behind the gym. Little things, but enough to show that something was going on. And Kieran didn't like it. "Oh, it's bad news," he said, shaking his head. "I don't know how, but it's all bad news. It's gotta be." Later that week, I was out with the guys. They were dropping by a house party and they wanted me to come along to meet some new people. It was mostly Holland pulling the strings on that one. He was invited pretty much everywhere. And we spent almost a full hour getting there, just because he got stopped by so many people that he knew on the way. It was 10 minutes away at a light jog. It was a pretty chill party. I ended up with a lukewarm beer sitting in a cheap white plastic deck chair texting. Holland was inside trying to figure out just how many people he knew there. Kieran sat in the deck chair next to me, but he had already finished his beer. We were talking about school when a streetlight came on, just a bit down the road. There was something else in the air, something like static. My phone started charging and I went from 2 bars of coverage to 5. I could feel the screen going hot. "You seeing this?" I asked, showing him my phone. "I told you," he said. "Something's wrong. Some mind cancer BS." Holland came rumbling out of the house with what looked like a quarter bottle of whiskey. And 2 guys were right behind him, one of them insisting that he could take him in a fight. A lot of people wanted to fight Holland just because he was the biggest. Holland waved them off and walked up to us. Kieran pointed down the street to the light. Holland looked for a while and then took a step back. "Oh shit, they got it working." "I don't know," Kieran huffed. "I don't like it." "Oh, it's gotta be brand new." Before I could say anything, he walked off to check it out. And Kieran and I got out of our chairs and followed him. A little group from the party tagged along. The closer that we got, the warmer that my phone went, like we were walking up to a power source. I stopped a couple of steps away while Holland stepped right into the sharp cone of light. It felt less like a street light and more like a spotlight. Center stage. He looked straight up like he was staring at the sun. "I don't get it," he said. "It ain't new. There are stickers and shit." "Oh, they probably just fixed the bulb," Kieran added. "Nah, there was nothing here." "You mean they put in a busted and tagged light from some other shithole?" "Come on, man." "I don't know what to tell you," Kieran shrugged. Holland tapped the streetlight a couple of times, shaking his head. The light went out, and we went from burning bright to murky street corner in the blink of an instant. And when we looked a little closer, Holland was gone. At first, we were just confused. Not just me and Kieran, but a whole bunch of people. We looked around like he had took off running. I called him, but I couldn't connect the call. Kieran snapped him, but got nothing. Here one moment and gone the next. While the others went looking for him and calling out to him, I took a closer look at the streetlight. I noticed something. There was no bulb, and the glass was broken. A moment ago it had been whole, but we hadn't heard any glass break and there were no shards on the pavement. And there were more stickers on the sides. And different stickers. It's like I was looking at a completely different streetlight. We walked around, calling out to Holland. Kieran elbowed me, showing me his phone. We walk this way, I get more bars," he said. "I bet there's another light. You think that he went there?" And Kieran didn't answer. He just shook his head and looked down. We walked around for a couple of hours trying to find Holland. He wasn't answering anything and we couldn't get a hold of him. Some folks ended up calling his uncle who he lived with, but he wasn't home either. Holland was gone, out like a light. And just like Kieran had predicted, we found another streetlight by the corner shop. It was only on for a couple of seconds, but in that time, I saw a stray cat walk through. It didn't come out on the other side. As the streetlight went out, I made the same observation as before. It looked completely different when it was on. There were two different lights, one functioning and one broken. Well, people started taking this seriously. A couple started to track the lights down and film them, hoping to see something weird. Others tried to dare one another to mess with them. I wasn't there for it myself, but apparently an older kid went missing the same way that night. They stepped into the light and they disappeared. This was no joke. People were calling not just one another, but parents, friends, family, and even the police. There were a couple of videos that started to circulate the group chats. Videos of a guy standing in the streetlight, making a peace sign, only to disappear when the lights went out. "I'm out," was the last thing that you hear him say. They're laughing in the video, until they ain't. That first night it just felt weird, but the next day it was real. Holland was missing. People were out looking, calling one another, asking where he had last been seen. I got 4 calls from people asking what had happened and where he went, and I had to tell them all the same thing. One moment he was there and then he wasn't. It didn't make any sense, and it's not the kind of thing that you can tell a worried guardian in a neighborhood where people had been known to get in trouble over nothing. And Kieran went over to Holland's place. I wasn't along for it, but apparently he had had a long talk with his uncle. All of a sudden, the streetlights weren't a fun quirk. There was something seriously wrong with them. While we were at school, somebody called city management to ask what the hell was going on. There were no answers, and nobody was willing to come down and talk to us. There were no squad cars going around, nobody knocking on doors asking questions. There definitely was no project to get the lights back on. Instead, while most of us went to school, some guys around the neighborhood brought hammers and saws and they took down the last remaining lights. The broken ones, that is. To an outsider, it must have looked like vandalism. For those of us who knew, it was a rare act of solidarity. Hell, even Mr. Barker was out on the street, leaving the sandwich place vacant for the first time in forever. And there was this feeling like, yeah, this neighborhood was shit, but it was ours, you know. Even I, who just got there, was still a part of it. We were in it together, and if nobody was gonna have our backs, then we would do it ourselves. But that didn't stop something strange from happening. Most nights, you could see the lights go on. Not all at once, a few and far between if anything, but they were there. Every now and then, somebody would disappear. It could take hours before we noticed, but by the time we did, it was already too late. In that first week, we lost something like 5 people. It got bad enough that people outside of the neighborhood had started to notice. We saw new cars passing through, looking around. A couple of folks showed up at our school just to tell us that we were all full of it. They saw the broken streetlights and thought that we were making it all up just to get some attention. They didn't understand. But the consequences were real as real can be. Holland was gone from class and nobody knew what to make of it. I mean, sure, people skip school all the time, but Holland wasn't like that. He may have been slow, but he wasn't negligent. He gave it an honest shot and he was there every day, come hell or high water. And Kieran and I had a couple of teachers come up to us after class asking us if we knew anything. I mean, what could we say? He gone with the light. It was the best way that Kieran could describe it. Like we keep telling you, Some people started walking in the middle of the street, hoping to stay out of the lights if they suddenly came on. Sure, people had always had a tentative relationship with jaywalking, but this was a whole new level. You could see an old woman with 2 grocery bags walk down the middle of Main Street, and nobody looked twice. It was amazing how fast people adapted, and how fast something turned from a rumor to a threat. But I guess if you're used to threats, another one isn't that surprising, no matter the shape or the form. I went out with a couple of people every now and then just to see what was going on. We could use our phones to kind of spot where the next streetlight would pop up. You would get a small charge and better coverage just moments before it came on, so you just had to pay attention. We usually saw them from down the street. Even if the light itself had been cut down and removed, a working one would stand there like nothing had happened, shining down. Some people would run from them, others would stop to take pictures. And once I saw a girl being held back by 2 of her friends, screaming at the light to give him back. We would do our part. Whenever a light came on, we would throw things at it. Rocks, bricks, whatever. We would break a couple. Maybe it helped, maybe it didn't, I don't know. But it felt good at doing something. Anything. One evening when we were out looking, a signal came on, stronger than before. We were right by the corner store where that cat had gone missing. Kieran pulled me back as a streetlight a couple of feet ahead of us lit up. I could hear the crackling from it, and I saw a TV in a nearby house flicker through a living room window. The emergency lights on a parked car started blinking, and there was somebody standing there. Holland. His skin was almost gray, and his lips were cracked like dry paper. His eyes were sunken and pale and full of dust. He was wearing nothing but shorts and a single sneaker. There was dry blood coming down his left arm. I could tell that he had trouble breathing, like he had been running or choking. Kieran was about to run up, but I grabbed him by the arm. Something felt off. The other guys filmed it. "Holland!" Kieran called out. "Holland, what the hell?" Holland shook his head, biting down on his lip. He covered the wound on his arm as he spoke, his voice barely a wheeze. "Tell Uncle I didn't leave him. It's messed up. Saw poison, but I didn't leave. I didn't go." "Just walk, get over here," I called out. "Come on, let's go." "Saw poison, dying. It's all poison." Alan took a step forward. As his body crossed that sharp cone, something happened. Parts of his body dissolved into a dithery cross-section. Slices disintegrated the moment that they left the light, swallowed by the darkness. I remember the moment that his face went from weeping to a death's head grin. His voice collapsed into a rattled falsetto, like somebody had poked a hole in his lungs halfway through a final wailing. And then the light went out. Kieran freaked out. The others were too, sharing the video with people from around the block. I just stood there trying not to piss myself. It took me 10 minutes to realize that Holland's shoes and shorts were still on the pavement. This had been real. The proof was right there. Some people thought the video was fake, even though there were 3 different angles. Others thought it was some kind of sick joke or a performance piece thing. Holland's uncle got pissed off beyond belief. He showed up at one guy's apartment screaming his lungs off, demanding that the video be taken down. Meanwhile, Kieran and I were making plans of our own. I figured if something like clothes can come back from whatever that is, then maybe we can film it. That was our working theory, at least. Kieran got a hold of a spare phone from his sister, and we decided why not, let's give it a shot. We got a selfie stick and we chased down a streetlight, hoping to time it just right. It took us a couple of tries, but a few days later, we had nailed it. Just beneath the streetlight outside of Mr. Barker's sandwich place, we managed to sneak in a recording phone. We put it on the sidewalk facing upward, making sure not to have anything but the phone and the selfie stick go inside the light. As it turned off, I grabbed the selfie stick and I pulled the phone in. The screen was fried, but we had managed to get the files off of it. The video footage was strange. We had only filmed for about 30 seconds or so, but the recording was well over 3 minutes. In it, you could see my face as I turned the video on. Then there's this bright light as the camera looks straight up. There's a static crackling as you can hear what sounds like a spinning fan going higher and higher, and you can hear Kieran and I talking in the background. Then, about 20 seconds in, the screen goes white. There's this crackling noise that rises and falls like an electric pulse. The white light would flicker with shades of blue and green, only to grow stronger and fade in waves. That's all there was. Kieran and I sat on a bench and we turned up the volume, using one earbud each. We maxed out the volume, trying to discern some kind of detail. Kieran gave up on the 4th try. "What if we speed it up?" he asked. "Or slow it down or whatever, just something else." "Why not play it backwards?" I scoffed. "Could be some Pink Floyd shit." "What?" Screw it." We tried a couple of things. Slowing it down, speeding it up, a low pass filter, a high pass filter. It wasn't until we had tried a noise reduction filter that we realized what we were listening to. It wasn't a wave or a pulse. It was a noise of some kind. It sounded like somebody talking. "An I," Kieran mumbled. "Sounds like they're saying an I." "They?" I asked. "Who's they?" "Well, I don't know, someone." Kieran shrugged. "Someone talking." I didn't like it, but he was right. It did sound like a voice, and it did sound like it was saying something. I just didn't like what I was hearing. A couple of folks were escalating things. There was this neighborhood watch kind of deal with some guys walking the streets with guns, taking shots at streetlights that appeared. Some probably just did it for the fun, but some of them were really serious about it. Holland's uncle was one of them. And Kieran and I didn't have the heart to hand him back the shoe and the shorts. The man looked like he was about to tear somebody's head off whenever we saw him. We tried to do a couple more recordings. There weren't as many streetlights around, but we caught a couple of them. It was scary though. Kieran was a bit rough around the edges. He almost stepped into the light once. I had to hold him back. I think if you see something enough times, you start to think it's no big deal even when it can kill you. It was like he was somehow exempt from the anger. We got 2 more videos and they were pretty similar. The sounds that we got were a bit different, and the length of the recording had changed, but we didn't get a clearer image. We tried putting the phone on its side, but it was difficult getting it to work without a working screen. We kinda had to guess where the record button was. After the 3rd recording, the battery exploded. It was a late Friday when I was out with Kieran, trying to figure out what to do next. We were standing outside of the corner shop, but they had closed early. It was getting dark, but we were keeping an eye on our phones. No signs of lights. We stood on the same corner where we had last seen Holland. A couple of folks had put flowers on the sidewalk, mostly roses and a couple of sunflowers. The petals were already sprinkled across the street. "I think we can try again," Kieran asked. "We can use my phone." "Oh, what's the point?" I asked, kicking some flowers around. "It's just light and noise. It doesn't mean anything." "So we just go home and then what?" "Yeah, we could play ball," I shrugged. "I don't know. Yeah, we're one man short for 3-on-3. A rose petal got stuck to my sneaker. I kicked it off with a sigh. "Fine, we'll use your phone." We walked around for a little over an hour. We heard a gunshot and saw one of the lights go out further down the street. I don't even think that it was a part of our neighborhood. It was way too far off. I bet a couple of innocent lights got busted in the process. Kieran and I walked round and round the block a couple of times, trying to find something on our phones. Not a peep. Maybe the watch got them all. I mean, there had to be an end to the lights at some point. We ended up right where we started, outside of the corner shop. Kieran was pissed as all hell, asking them to check their phones to see if anybody was picking up something. And meanwhile, I was checking my socials. People were talking about the lights like it was some kind of urban legend. Even people who lived in the neighborhood were talking about it like it was an excuse. It was this attitude of, "Oh, we know what's really going on." It was like Holland was some kind of gangster who had it coming. It didn't matter how many people came to his defense in the comments. The memes and crappy jokes were all that remained in the top comments. After 10 minutes or so, Kieran put his phone down and frowned, and then he looked up. "Hey," he said, "is your phone okay?" "Yeah," I nodded, 98%. "We've been out for hours, man. It shouldn't still be at 98. My hand felt warm as I looked down. I got 5 bars of coverage. The sweat trickled down my neck as my hair stood up from the static air. I realized that I was leaning back on something that hadn't been there a moment before. Something metallic and tall. The light came on. My throat immediately closed off, like my body was protecting me from something. I couldn't even exhale. It was just this thick phlegm sinking into my lungs. The light was blinding me, turning the entire world a burning white. I could see an outline of the street even then. I could see a shadow of what looked like Kieran just a couple of feet ahead, but the world was too bright to make out the details. He looked like someone had spilled an ink blot in his likeness. It was the same neighborhood, the corner shop, the sandwich place, but it all looked different. Cleaner, different names on the signs, more screens in the windows, a bigger sun in the sky. Kieran was moving around, but slowly. He was reaching for me, screaming something. It came through as this static, where only a couple of syllables made sense. He was panicking, but it was like seeing it in slow motion. I turned my head, looking for something, anything. I didn't even know what. Just whatever could save me at that moment. My skin felt like it had been dipped in boiling water, turning from a searing heat into an icy cold. I could feel the moisture in my eyes and mouth evaporate, and the skin around my gums tighten as my teeth strained against the sudden pressure. There were people there, dead in the streets. Most of them made it a couple of steps from the lights. Others were still sitting underneath them, as if waiting for them to come back on. One dead man looked more like a burned log than a person, leaving a seared imprint on the concrete. It had only been a couple of seconds, but my head was swimming. I could see heat swaying on the horizon, and the sky beyond it as a distant mirage. It was midday and it was killing me. There were no clouds and no sky. It was just a pale white and a black hole, like I was staring up into an all-encompassing eye. Blood vessels the size of distant galaxies, and impossible attention turned our way. I remember trying to say a word, but I could only click my tongue. An eye, an eye, an eye. I took a step and I fell forward. I had slipped on something. Even now, I could see the flowers on the street, the rose petals and the sunflowers. They had turned a strange blue and curled in on themselves, like dying bugs underneath a magnifying glass. Kicking out with my leg, I realized why I had slipped. I had stepped on something. Holland's second shoe. I kicked it. It bounced a couple of feet and lost its color. Maybe I was going blind. My eyes were swelling shut, but even with my eyes closed, the light burned through my mind. It was this otherworldly feeling, like I was falling, but not from the world disappearing beneath me. It felt more like I was growing smaller and smaller at such a rate that the air around me just couldn't keep up. Something shifted and I heard a thump, like rubber hitting glass. Kieran had thrown the shoe at the streetlight and had made it flicker, if only for a second. He yelled something, but I only heard the first word. Hold. I just lay there trying to force air in and out of my lungs, but I couldn't. It all felt like poison. This place, it was wrong. It was made for something or someone else at another time and place. People weren't meant to walk those streets or sit beneath its lights. It must have been some kind of mistake. A huge, terrible mistake. And all the while, something was watching me break into pieces. An eye. I remember the last sensation of touch leaving my fingers as the concrete faded away. My mind was shutting down, racing 100 ways per second. Maybe that's what it feels like when you're dying. I don't know. Maybe that's what I was doing. It wasn't really panic or even euphoria. It was more like anything and everything. The rubber taste of a pacifier, the smell of batteries, the feeling of a freshly made bed under my fingers. Like my mind was grasping at whatever straws it could find, hoping to keep me kicking for just a little bit longer. And then it slowed and slowed and slowed. Now I've heard about this next part from some guys in school. No one knew Holland's uncle used to be in the Navy. No one knew that he could hit a streetlight from all the way down the street one-handed with a handgun. He barely had to aim. He just pointed, clicked, boom, done. It was the only light that he shot, and he hit it right on the mark first try. And thank God that he did. The moment that the streetlight popped, I could feel a flush of cool air. It felt like that I had come up to the surface after a long dive. The moment that my lungs opened, I exhaled this black powder straight from the bottom of my lungs. Kieran was already dragging me into the street, calling for help. I couldn't see anything. Everything burned like I had pressed my whole body against a hot stovetop and only just now released the pressure. Some people were running our way, calling out to us. I heard someone mention my name. It hurt when Kieran shook my shoulder, but it was nice to feel something real. When I finally got enough soot out to gasp for breath, I could feel the world returning to me. My thoughts mellowed, and the pinprick in my dry eyes widened. They had my mom and aunt come pick me up. They had to drive me into the city. And by the time that I got to the emergency room, I was so tired that I couldn't remember my name. I just sat there giggling like a goofball, falling in and out of consciousness. They probably thought that I was on something. When I woke up the next day, I was on the couch in my aunt's living room. Mom was stroking my hair. The TV was running, but they had lowered the volume. There was orange juice on the table, and one of Mr. Barker's sandwiches, the meat kind. I remember everything hurting, my eyes especially. I could barely keep my hand steady, but man, was I happy. I moved out of that neighborhood a couple of years ago when I got a job in the inner city. Some folks may have heard the rumors of those strange lights, but most thought that it was just a hoax. I think the total number of missing people was somewhere around 9, but at least one of them turned out to be someone who skipped town. Didn't really help the credibility of the real victims. If you talk to the right people and mention the right names, I'm sure that they'll tell you all about it. Not because it's the most interesting thing in the world or the strangest thing that they've seen. No, they'll tell you because it was something that we managed to deal with as a community. After a couple of weeks, there were no more streetlights. We got them all and they never came back on. Alan's uncle had got the last one, and thank God that he did. I haven't been there for some time now, but from what I hear, things are pretty much the same. Mr. Barker's probably closing in on 80 by now, but he still works that sandwich stand. Some folks still leave flowers by the corner shop, and if you ask the right person what happened there, they'll tell it like it is. Holland, he gone. He gone with the light.
Some years ago, I worked with a tunneling crew. A job like that draws all kinds of people. Sure, it boils down to one guy holding the figurative shovel, but another guy has to point where to dig and yet another's got to get the dirt out. On a larger scale, it can easily get out of hand without proper management. Our crew was working on expanding a subway tunnel. It wasn't anything that we couldn't handle, but my life was in a bit of a mess at the moment. My wife and I just had our first kid, and I was having trouble keeping up with the new lifestyle. My wife was a trooper, but no matter what I did, I always felt like I was doing something wrong. That baby must have been the most patient one ever, as I fumbled with the most basic chores. I would tuck her in too tight or get the temperature on the formula wrong. It was just one mess after another, and that's after working a 10-hour shift. The only thing that I got right was putting her to sleep. I would tuck my hand behind her little head and shush her and sing, and she would go out like a light. Bam, down for the count. That one thing sort of made up for all my other mistakes. I have to thank my mom for the tip someday. It's an old song. It goes a little something like, "Oh, I, foof, my little one." Like a bolt of lightning from last one. You don't, but it's the best you got. It pays well, real well. I can bring all your guys and starting tomorrow. What do you say? I said the only thing that I could. I said yes. It was tough to come home that day. I had been surrounded by this ceaseless vitriol all afternoon. One of the guys had been crying in the porta potty. This was supposed to be a long-term gig, and now we were all on shaky ground. Whatever this new job entailed, it didn't exactly calm us down. But at least we could keep our heads up a little longer. I don't think I did a single thing right that evening. I forgot to wash my hands when I picked up my baby girl, getting her wispy hair a little dirty. I changed her diaper, but I couldn't get the thing to sit right, and I used way too much powder. It was just one thing after another. It wasn't until I sat down to watch the news that I finally got to do the one thing that I was good at, singing her to sleep. One verse and she was out. My wife joined me on the couch, speaking in a hushed voice. She was just as worried as me about the job, but I could tell that she was trying to stay positive. She asked all kinds of questions like what we were doing and for how long and with what people. And I didn't have an answer for any of it. Not unlike the talking heads on the TV. All I could say is that we had a time, a place, and a generous paycheck. "Just be careful," she said, giving me a kiss on the cheek. Doing tunnel work is rough for a number of reasons. In summer, you're melting away in the heat, and in autumn, you're knee-deep in rain. In winter, well, you don't do a lot of digging in the winter. The ground gets frozen and it can mess up the equipment. Depends on the job site, I guess. And we were nearing the end of the season. The last dig of the summer is the one that you finish just before you go on vacation, and my guys had been robbed of theirs. I knew of at least one guy who had to cut his trip to Tallahassee. He wouldn't shut up about it. It was better than having no job at all, but the disappointment was immeasurable. We had been promised stable work for years to come, and now we were fighting for scraps. The location turned out to be a construction site, not a dig site, mind you. There's a difference. The place was roughly the size of a football field, lined with a chain-link fence wrapped in yellow plastic. There were all kinds of construction tools lying around, seemingly abandoned. There was even a bulldozer. We waited for about an hour before someone showed up. There was this one guy with protective glasses and a hard hat, our supposed foreman. He seemed friendly enough, probably somebody a bit further down the career ladder. He came up to us and clapped his hands to get our attention. "Everyone feeling okay?" he asked, throwing his arms out. There was a murmur, but nobody was particularly enthusiastic about the whole thing. We weren't a construction crew. Then again, at that point, we had no idea what kind of crew we were supposed to be. "Oh, we're gonna go through all the details in a bit," he continued. "I just want to say that I know this isn't ideal. We didn't have a choice in the matter. That said, if this works out, we're gonna have a lot more work for you going forward. So let's get started, okay?" That lifted our spirits a little. I saw a couple of nods and the hint of a smile. Maybe things would work out. We walked into the site. He showed us this spot at the far end, right next to a jackhammer. There was a hole about 3 feet deep and 6 feet across. It looked like they had dug it out with shovels, by hand. In the middle of the hole, there was a rock formation, like a white spike poking out of the ground. It was roughly the length of my arm. "This is what we found," the foreman said. "This particular mineral is uncommon in this part of the country. It's mainly used in pharmaceuticals." "What's it called?" "A pyrolith. It's used in something called Compound 5. It's life-saving stuff." He went on to explain the process. Essentially, this construction site was found to be littered with pyrolith minerals. The entire site needed to be dug out carefully, and the minerals had to be extracted as a whole. 2 guys were on standby to measure, catalog, and mark down each extracted sample down to the milligram. The tools were oddly specific. For example, we couldn't use jackhammers. We had to slowly work the base of the mineral with a portable water jet cutter. We couldn't touch the minerals without wearing rubber gloves, and we had to put out sprinklers near every active dig spot to suppress mineral dust. That, and there was a gas mask mandate. "It's important that we don't breathe this stuff in," he explained. "You don't want that." And by the end of our first day, we had dug up 5 of those spike things. They were all carefully placed in a vacuum container and sealed with a silicone spray. All that work for what equates to a suitcase of rocks. At the end of our shift, one of the guys had noticed something funny. And technically, we were right next door to our abandoned subway gig. Out through one door and in through another. It took some time to get used to the new setup, and we had to work with a lot of protective gear, and we kept getting soaked by the water jet and sprinklers. Working in that kind of environment gives you all kinds of uncomfortable aches, especially when you need to have a gas mask. The mix of heat and water kept fogging up the glass, sucking the salt from my skin and stinging my eyes. It was exhausting. We usually managed to get somewhere around 6 to 10 pile lists a day, depending on the weather and how fast we could get to the base of the mineral. And they were all roughly 3 feet down, but a few of them were a bit smaller. Some were a bit bigger. There was one of them that was so tall that it poked out of the ground, but it had turned a metallic gray. And we sent a picture of it to the foreman, and he said that it was a no-go. "It's gone bad," he explained. "Cut it, leave it, it don't matter." Every night when I came home, I could barely stand. I fell asleep in the shower once, waking only when the water had turned cold. I'd remember to eat, and just because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. It was a strange feeling, and my wife could tell that I wasn't doing all right. I felt bad at not being able to keep up with the housework. But hey, at least I could sing my baby to sleep. That I could do. The fact that the site was so close to our old tunnel job was really strange. It was literally a stone's throw away, but cities can get like that sometimes. It might take 20 to 30 minutes in traffic to get from one street to another. But walking there at a brisk pace, it takes a couple of minutes. I hadn't even thought about it until they had pointed it out. The job was going to take weeks, maybe months, at the pace that we were going. We got the go-ahead to bring in some more guys, but it was hard to find people for a temp job at short notice. I managed to get a hold of 4 more in total, but trying to bring them up to speed was a hassle. I kept getting all these questions that I couldn't answer. For example, why couldn't we just dig up the whole site and then filter out the pylith later? We could have done it all in about a week tops. And yeah, they were right, but we weren't allowed to do that. And what the hell is a pylith anyway? After a full week of working with the stuff, we were getting into a sort of rhythm. We split up between surface testing, excavation, cutting, and transport. I was one of the cutters. I stood in a dirt pit with brown water up to my knees, trying not to get my fingers blown off as the drainage pump flopped around. Now I'm good at what I do, but we were working without proper routine and oversight. It was the Wild West. The first accident happened about 8 days into the job. One of the guys, I can't remember his name, got his face dust sprayed with pylith. The sprinklers had stopped working and he had to change his filter after a cut. All we saw was how he stepped away, took the mask off, and had a seizure. They had to carry him away and wash the dust off with a hose. He got back to work after a couple of days, but I don't think he was ever the same. There was something off about him. Not quite a 1,000-yard stare, but he would tilt his head up at strange angles every now and then, like he was looking at something behind the clouds. That, and he stopped complaining about his canceled Tallahassee trip. The second accident was one of the other cutters. He had just finished a smaller pilot spike when I saw him dip one of his legs down. It looked like he had just stepped wrong, but there was this look of genuine surprise on his face, and then we heard a pop like something exploding. And the guy screamed like a wounded animal, this repetitive shriek over and over as he clutched his leg. And when we got to him, I could see most of his foot and part of his leg had been crushed. Not just a sprain or something, but mangled. You could barely tell there was a foot at the end. It looked like cloth-covered meat. And when they carried him off, he was delirious. I heard him mumble as they shut the ambulance door. Breathing, breathing, breathing. If it had been any other job, we would have called it quits long ago. One workplace accident, it happens. But two on such short notice. No, that doesn't happen. Problem was, it felt like the bigwigs were only one step away from shutting us down all over again. They hounded us with that fact every chance they got. The foreman would slide a comment in about it when he could. Like at the end of every shift, I gave him an update on our progress. He always asked if things had gone smoothly, and whenever I said it did, he would just respond, "Good. Don't know how we could afford keeping this afloat if it didn't." Every damn time. So yeah, we had to make do. It was dirty work for dirty people, but what choice did we have? No one else was hiring, and getting the whole crew to another site on short notice was impossible. You don't spend that kind of money on a whim, and there was no standing contract lurking around the corner. These kinds of jobs take months of planning and contract negotiation. You'll be eating well into your savings long before you see a paycheck. And we kept having trouble with our gear. Not just because things would bend and break, I mean that's normal. Wear and tear is a part of the job. The problem was that we had no idea what kind of supports we were looking at, and most of our equipment was still at the tunnel site. We kept having trouble with the ground shifting. Sometimes when we dug out the pileless, the dirt would collapse. It wasn't bad enough to hurt anyone, but it was frustrating. We had a bunch of sandbags and supports on the old dig site, but we weren't allowed to get them. I kept hearing things around the site. The guy who had inhaled the dust complained about losing his sense of taste. The guy who had his foot crushed was admitted to psychiatric care. Another guy kept talking about how he found this black door at his apartment complex that he couldn't remember having ever seen before. Just a whole set of strange rumors. Every day felt like walking into a ghost story. Someone had something eerie to say. My first unusual experience was nowhere near as dramatic. I was working the water jet cutter when I accidentally had angled it downward. I left it on a little too long and I cut into the rocks surrounding the mineral. At first I thought that I had hit a sewer line, but that would mean that it was inches from the surface. There was no way that was true, but the ground erupted with this foul black, like fish guts and mineral oil. I got out of there real quick, and the moment that I stepped out of the hole, the dirt collapsed around me, almost like the ground shook a little. On our third week, some people got sick. We thought it was a stomach bug going around, but we figured out the common denominator. Everyone who had gotten sick had regularly eaten dairy products for lunch or breakfast. Turns out on closer inspection that a lot of dairy spoiled around the dig site, like to the point where you could track it by looking at it. If we left a chocolate milk out in the open, the damn thing would be solid white mold before the end of the day. So yeah, no dairy on the dig site. I remember once in the break room, 6 of us were sitting around just chatting, and this one guy joins in with a yogurt. He knows we're not supposed to eat dairy, but he doesn't care anymore. He's staring straight ahead, shoveling spoonfuls into his mouth. I don't need to look to see that it's gone bad. I can smell it. We all can smell it. But he just sits there chewing it down like he doesn't have a care in the world. You can't eat that stuff. Someone mumbles. You get sick. The guy turns his head and licks the container clean. He doesn't even blink. You don't think what we're doing is sick? He asks. You think this is okay? It's a job, calm down. We're all sick in the head, the guy says, clutching his head. Parasites. He didn't stay long. After starting a third fight that same day, we had to let him go. And coming home every day was like coming up for air after a long drive. Everything felt brighter and I'd happily do whatever was asked of me. Changing diapers, no problem. Taking out the trash, wonderful. Anything and everything was better than staying another damn minute at the site. Thinking about going back the next day made me feel like a rock in the pit of my stomach. I'd look in the bathroom mirror trying to convince myself to get through one more day. But while I might not be the best at being a homebody, my wife rightfully pointed out that I was doing worse than usual. And she was right, I was. It wasn't a conscious thing, but once I noticed it, I couldn't ignore it. For example, I would put all the dishes into a vertical pile instead of the dishwasher. There was just something hypnotic about arranging them in a pattern. I would sometimes stand in front of the open refrigerator, holding my hands out like I was warming them by a fire. I got to the point where I was scared to be alone with my baby girl. What if I forgot her on the changing table? I couldn't live with myself if she got hurt. And still, we needed the money. Rent was going up, expenses were going up, and we needed a new set of tires for the car. We had already sold off our spare car. We couldn't afford to go without one. It was bad enough that we had to share one. I remember this one night as I was standing by my baby's crib. She was having trouble going back to sleep, and so I leaned in to sing. Problem is, I couldn't remember the words. I had never written them down or anything, so there was this sudden sense of loss in me, like I had forgotten something that was a part of me, instead of just a song. And my girl, oh, she could tell. She was screaming a little heart out, begging me to remember. And I stood there opening and closing my mouth like a fish out of water, trying to explain that the words just weren't there. I'm sorry, I said, shaking my head. Oh, I'm so sorry, baby. When she fell asleep that night, it wasn't because she felt safe and cared for. It was exhaustion, just like me. By that time, coming to the site felt like walking into purgatory. One guy is off in the corner hurling his guts out. One guy is crying on a bench. One is lying flat on his back, looking up at the sky. 2 guys don't even show up for work. And we barely made progress. What little we get is mostly from what we had started the previous shift. Around lunch, one guy was taking off his protective gear and going to town on a pilot like he was a sick cow with a salt lick. We had to pry him off and send him home. He laughed the whole way. By late afternoon, I was the only one working on this one particular pilot. The damn thing was big enough that I would have trouble lifting it by myself. I had to dig a little deeper than usual to get to the base, and I wasn't paying as much attention as I should have. By the time that I pulled down the water cutter, the cable dislodged something and the entire hole had collapsed.
with me in it. I was buried under the dirt. Thank God for all that gear. I was lying face down in the dirt. I could breathe a little thanks to my gas mask in the porous ground, but it was like sucking air through a straw. I barely knew what was up or down. No matter which direction I pushed, it felt like something was pushing back. It's like the ground was trying to absorb me. I wasn't down for long, but in that moment, I felt this intense sense of dread. Not just a claustrophobic panic, but something else. I could imagine myself being stuck there, solidified as a relic in eternal stasis, like watching myself fossilize. All sense of time and passage of the world melted away. I could imagine the years flying by, leaving me helpless. If I had been down there 1,000 years, would I even want to get back up? And by the time they pulled me out, I was screaming. I don't remember, but I was. Apparently, I was begging for them to put me back in the ground. At the end of the day, I was sitting across from one of the machine operators. He was trying to have a glass of water, but he ended up throwing it out. Said it tasted funny. "We gotta do something about the equipment," he said. "We got tens of thousands of dollars still stuck in those tunnels. Hundreds of thousands, maybe. You think they're happy to leave it there? You honestly think they care? Well, I care. Hell, I'll take it off their hands if they ain't using it." "You're not suggesting that we steal from the company?" "What company?" he laughed. "Do you even know who we're working for? You know what we're doing. You see any workers' comp going out to the guys who say everything tastes like gasoline?" I shook my head. I didn't like it, but he was right. He took off his hard hat, dropping it on the table. "I say we get our fair share. Split it right down the middle," he said. "You in?" "I'm in." I told my wife that I'd be late the next day. 3 guys volunteered to help pick things up after our shift. There was a fair chance that we wouldn't get anything, but at that point we didn't care. Some of us were desperate to just get a big enough paycheck to cash out and make a run for it. We didn't want to be there anymore. None of us did. We drove down to the old tunnels and prepared ourselves. One guy brought a 2-wheeler, another brought flashlights, and one brought in walkie-talkies. We were going to turn the power on, but it was easy to get lost down there. Half the map wasn't finished, and most of the rooms were dead ends. You could get lost on the best of days, and we were barely functional. We made our way into the tunnels, keeping in touch as we went. It didn't take long for us to find some personal items, but there was quite a bit more to it. We could tell that others had been down there. There were a whole bunch of things that we hadn't seen before. Some of it I could barely understand. For example, there was this one drill that looked like an 8-foot-long syringe on a rail, leading to a hole in the wall. That's not what we were there for, but I couldn't help but raise my eyebrow at that. While the others found some gear, I decided to look a little further in. There was this one space that I had been working in just before we got shut down that I knew had a backpack full of seismic measuring equipment. It didn't take all that long for me to find my way back there. But the backpack was long gone. That figures. That thing alone was at least 25 grand. As I was about to head back to the others, I swept my flashlight across the black door. I don't remember that ever being there. I checked in with the others over the walkie, and they were still trying to dislodge one of the backup drills. I had some time, so I decided to check it out. I stepped inside just as the walkie crackled to life again. "I got the power. Hold on to something,"
Seconds later, there was a hum and a crackle. I swept my flashlight across the room, seeing nothing out of the ordinary. It was a small cube-shaped room with the furthermost wall being pale white dirt. I was there with a light fixture overhead, so I searched the wall for a switch. I found it and turned it on, just to see if there was something that I had missed. The moment the light came on felt like staring into the sun. I hadn't realized how used I had gotten to the dark. That and the light seemed to be some kind of UV. It wasn't just bright, it was warm. The moment that it turned on, I saw the wall shift. Not by much, just a twitch. And dirt don't move like that though. The ground shook as people started calling out on the walkie. Somebody was screaming about a burst water pipe. Another one kept going. What the hell? Over and over. I could hear the sound of metal bending and breaking as support snapped, making the tunnels outside crumble. I could hear these blocks of stone, each one heavy enough to crush my car, falling like raindrops. The wall moved. The ground moved. I was standing still, watching solid concrete roll beneath me. The light flickered. A whole section of wall roiled like liquid, only to reveal this enormous glass-like structure. I stepped closer, watching these whirling colors slosh from left to right, up and down, like an organic membrane suspended in gelatin. Blue lines spreading out like the petals of a sunflower. As I step back and take in the whole picture, my breath gets stuck in my throat. The entire wall is the bottom half of an eye, a bright blue eye adjusting to the sudden bright light. I've never felt anything like in that moment. It's like the sky keeps falling over and over, like you're taking a step back even though you're standing still, making the world feel smaller with every breath. I could barely understand it. My legs felt so small that I couldn't feel myself walking. The power cut out. The bright blue pupil disappeared, leaving the outline of the shape lingering in my mind's eye. The sounds of the outside world faded away. I could hear the screaming in the walkie like a distant whisper. I could sense the rumble as the tunnels collapsed. I could feel the weight of the organic slosh as a mass of nerves far larger than me moved at breakneck speed, left to right, displacing the air. It's coming down! Somebody cried in the walkie. Get the hell out, it's all coming down. But I couldn't move. I looked straight ahead into the darkness and I pushed my hand back towards the door. I couldn't open it. There was a blockage on the outside. The concrete ceiling was starting to crack. My mind pendulumed between sobering fear and a mind-gutting sense of hollowness. I was a father. I was nothing. I was being buried alive. I was pointless. All the while, I hear the surreal sound of something beyond my comprehension of scale starting to move. And I realize that I'm going to die down there. I'm going to be crushed or left to suffocate. And there's this little voice in the back of my head, whispering at me that there's a very real chance I don't come home tonight. That my baby girl isn't going to sleep well ever again. And I just break. I absolutely break. I slam my body against the door, I scream and shout and beat my fists on the metal sheeting. I step back and brace myself, throwing my weight at it, but it doesn't even budge. The voices on the walkie aren't even saying words anymore, having devolved into a panicked screeching. I step away from the door towards the eye, I fumble in the dark, picking up a fistful of concrete to use as a weapon. I move closer, ready to plunge my fist into the surface of the eye when I notice something. I'm stepping in liquid. I didn't hear a water pipe burst, not in here. I fumble for my flashlight. I barely manage to pick it up as my hands keep failing me. But as I turn it on, I realize that there's a thin layer of water lining the floor. An oily kind of salt water. And looking up at the eye, I see that it's leaking at the edges. Tears, maybe. Something in me clicks. The rapid eye movement, the sudden sense of panic and collapse. It dawns on me that I've seen this before. I've seen it a dozen times. It's just like when my baby girl wakes up in the middle of the night looking for her papa. That's all that it is. And I think about that moment when I was buried at the dig site with that sense of the world passing me by. I wouldn't want to wake from that. I wouldn't want to know which of my friends were dead or alive, which family members made it. I wouldn't want to know just how alone I really was. I would rather stay a fossil. Maybe that was it. Maybe that was it the whole time. Maybe we had been cleaning the scalp of something having a really, really bad dream. I turned off my flashlight and stepped a little closer. I could feel this thrumming movement coming from the membrane as nerves contracted, pushing out bucket after bucket of liquid. Meanwhile, I'm closing my eyes and thinking about an imaginary hand placed behind a tender head, fussing about going to sleep. Wispy hair getting caught between my fingers. At that moment, the words returned to me. The lullaby. With a shaky voice, I sing them. A voice in the dark, hoping something impossible can hear me and find comfort. Oh, I, foof, my little one. I sing it again and again and again. I'm imagining that little bundle in my arms and how it settles into a rhythm. How our breathing steadies with mine. A little hand wrapping around my finger and then letting go as the dreams take hold. And after a while, I realize the wall has stopped moving. It's just white dirt. Nothing is moving, collapsing, or breaking. It's just me in a dark room and my workmates trying to move a boulder outside the door. Something's gone back to sleep. When we got out, things had gone completely to shit. Car alarms were going off, streetlights had died. Fire hydrants were pouring into the street. Waiting for us just outside were 2 patrol vehicles, ready to ask us some serious and uncomfortable questions. The whole ordeal was categorized as a localized seismic event. The company decided not to press any charges, and they just had us trespassed. But even that would eventually be overturned. You see, they still needed somebody to work the dig site. There were pilot to cut and there was nobody around willing to do it. And honestly, who was more experienced working with this stuff than me and my crew? We had started to get the hang of it. We could make up our own rules. And now that I had an idea of what we were dealing with, I could do it in a way that wouldn't get us all killed. So yeah, we got back to work. I've been doing pilot digs for years now. We figured out a good routine and procedure, allowing us to rotate crew in a way that doesn't get us sent to the hospital. I got about 30 guys working with me. There's not a lot of demand for it, but what demand there is pays very well. I don't think you'll find any Craigslist postings for pilot diggers anytime soon, but we're out there. Sometimes it just looks like a construction site. Sometimes they don't bother trying to hide it. People see a jackhammer and they roll their eyes, hoping that we won't stick around for long. My girl isn't a baby anymore, but in another sense of the word, she absolutely is. I've managed to scrape together a pretty good life for her. I work weekdays along with every second and third weekend of the month, but I get the full first week of the month completely off. Just 2 paid vacation weeks a year though. But the hourly rates are just, I'll admit, I'm a bit spoiled. I could sign off on a new pool and it wouldn't break our budget. But I feel like I had to take a moment to look back at it all. Not just because it was a monumental day of my life, but because it changed something in me. I may be the smallest, most insignificant thing in whatever world this is, but I'm still here. I can still do something. And if I can do that one goddamn thing right, is that not enough reason to do it? I'm thinking, whenever I'm gray and gone, is my girl gonna remember the fancy vacations and the new car smell of our family Hyundai? Or is she gonna remember the times that I sung her to sleep? I don't need an answer. I know it. I feel it. And somewhere deep underground, there is something that feels the same.